This is the D6 generation with your hosts, Craig Gallant.
No, cut that. Keep that. Someday it's going to be worth something.
Russ Wakelin.
You put me in an ATST with frickin' Wookiees attacking me and whatnot?
Now you're talking.
And Luke Retallack in the third chair.
This look like the work of a dead man to you?
With contributions from Total Fangirl
Vampires do not sparkle.
and our loyal listeners.
Crazy? That's like 400 hours of gamer nonsense.
Welcome to another edition of Rapid Fire, the roundtable discussion of all things gaming, coming at the speed of an inspired blood reaver sidestepping across the shattered city. Today's edition is brought to you by all of our fine friends over at Patreon, the men, the women, the boys, the girls, the dogs, the cats that help us keep the lights on from one show to the next. Today we're going to thank Neil Douglas, Patrick Drobotij, not even close, Adam Duckin, Jeremy Dunham, and Sam E. See, that's easy. Sam E, the letter E. I could do that. I'm Geekly McNerdigan, your host today. Our panelists are Russ Representation Wakelin and special guest Luke Reflector Retallack, former co-host of World's End Radio and now co-host and imminent video game expert on the Party Loaded podcast and channel Endgame. Let's begin. Issue number 1. Video games are one of the largest segments of the entertainment industry and one of the most swiftly growing. For hours more entertainment on the dollar than nearly any other form, the interactive elements as well as the sheer depth of genres covered, there's something for everyone amidst the panoply of video gamedom. Question, how many layers can be found in the game industry value chain by Ben Sawyer of Digital Mill? Recorded Russ.
It's like an onion, really. There's many, many layers.
It is indeed, but I'm looking for a number, so you're wrong. Yes, then that's a Luke.
I prefer you to the trapezoid model, where the value comes from the top down, ending up on the side where I got nothing.
Sadly, it's simple. It's simple. It's 6. There's 6. It starts with the people who have the money, and then it goes to the people who make it the game, and then it goes to the all the way down to you guys who will just spend countless dollars and hours, and anyway, it's 6. Or quantum, if either of you got it right, which neither of you did, so I didn't have to worry about it. Issue number 2. A mirror is an object that reflects light in such a way that, for incident light in some range of wavelengths, the reflected light preserves many or most of the detailed physical characteristics of the original light. Quite often in literature, mirrors are used as allegories for our own shattered reflections, both physically and psychologically, and thus feature prominently in many different types of stories. Question. What year was the movie Mirrors, a supernatural horror film directed by Alexandra Aja, starring Kiefer Sutherland, Paula Patton, and Amy Smart, filmed? Rosa Russ.
1986.
1986. Yes, that would be wrong. Larry Bird Luke.
Oh, 2006, I'm going to say.
Oh, you're so close. 2007. Ooh. First released in 2008. Which makes you 2000 and wrong! Issue number 3. The video game market is chock full of choices for all tastes and budgets. And there are as many bests as there are people to express those tastes. And of course, the internet creates just that many more experts every year. Podcasters and such like. But sometimes a game will rise above the crowd and be hailed by all and sundry as one of the best of the best. So far in 2017, question. What video game title has captured the 2 top slots across the globe? Robo Recall Russ.
Destiny 2.
Res Infinite Retallack.
Whoa, I'm going to say Breath of the Wild.
Oh, and I'm going to say wrong because you didn't include Legend of Zelda. So that makes you wrong, even though Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild. But on a technicality, I'm calling you wrong because I've just been too nice recently to other guests, which is costing you, Luke. It's costing you. And it's not fair, but life's not fair, princess. Anybody who tells you differently is selling something. Issue number 4. The holy grail for many game companies is perfecting a rule set that is both fun and lends itself to the competitive scene. A stamp that no company wants is the faint praise, it's okay for a light game anyway. In fact, many gaming publishers have spent years trying to walk the careful balance between fun and competition, which of course begs the question, how do those other companies do it all the time? Somehow it always comes down to luck mitigation. Question. If the undying slot machine is at one end of the luck continuum in a casino, what game occupies its polar opposite slot? Roulette Russ.
Chess.
Loch Ness Luke.
Craps.
That would be poker. That would be. Oh, sorry. I gotta get you on a technicality. It's gonna be poker. But if you had said poker, I was gonna say pachenga, which apparently is also poker, but it's a different word, which means technically you still would have been wrong. Anyway, that's it for now. Thanks for listening, and good night.
This episode of the D6 Generation is brought to you by Lone Wolf Development. Take your game to the next level.
And by Geek Nation Tours. Rise up and join the Geek Nation, touring the world at geeknationtours.com.
And by Audible. Try the service, get a free book, and support the show. All by visiting audibletrial.com/D6G. And here we go. Achievements in gaming in 5, 4. Hello!
Hello.
Hey,
Ooh, that's a big and hearty hello.
That is a
from Down
bold
Under.
announcement from Down Under, right? And welcome to episode 224, Greg.
224. That's that. 224 is actually the first two digits added together for the third digit.
Exactly right.
I believe there may be some sort of code involved in this episode.
There might be, yes. 224 of the D6 Generation. I am Russ Wakeland.
I am Craig Gallant.
And I am Luke Retallack.
Hey,
Hello.
Luke Retallack.
Great to have you back on the show. Of course, listeners will remember Luke. He's been on the show before. Of course, the Aussie from Down Under, responsible for or heavily involved
like most of the Aussies.
Luke, I have to ask you this. Well, some have left, but not all.
Emigrated if they're leaving.
Yes, but
Bailed is the correct term as far as we're concerned.
Bailed.
Aborted.
Turned traitor
escaped,
to run.
Right, escaped. No, it's a joke. But Luke, you're involved in both channel Endgame as well as the Party Loaded podcast. Now,
that is right.
What are your roles and responsibilities there? Like, how would you characterize your position involving these two entities?
Well, they're essentially sort of bundled up together. If you think of Channel Endgame as the Umbrella Corp and Party Loaded as the Horde of Zombies, it's probably not too far off.
Oh, there you go.
No, Channel Endgame is kind of just the overarching term we give to our entire collection of content, which encapsulates the podcast stuff and also the YouTube content. So Party Loaded is a podcast under that banner, essentially.
Excellent.
So Party Loaded, of course, being a weekly show that we do covering all things video gaming. So everything to do with the industry, news, reviews, interviews, general thoughtful discussion, and been going strong for just under 2 years now. We just literally hit our 100th episode. So that's a bit of a milestone.
Congratulations. That is fantastic news. So I'm thrilled because, since Rafe is only now a part-time contributor to the show, I miss our occasional chats about video games. So, Luke, this is a fantastic opportunity. Whenever you come back on the show, I'm always excited because it's a great chance to catch up on gabbing about video games, which I feel like I do too rarely. There's a word there I want to use that means not often enough, basically. Is what I'm trying to say.
More games good.
Yes, exactly right. So
it is about that time of year as well. So I think we've hit the nail on the head once again.
Oh, yes. So we're definitely going to talk about video games, and then later we're going to review Warhammer Underworlds Shadespire. For long-time listeners to Luke, they'll know that Luke, of course, is also a fanatical miniature gamer as well. So Luke has definitely done more than a little dabbling in his share of miniature gaming. So I thought that'd be a great. Craig and I have had a chance to dabble in that one, and I'm sure Luke is interested to know more about that. So we'll talk more about that later. But before we get to all that stuff,
yes,
Craig, we should probably take care of a few bits of business. First of all, the Lost Chapters.
Bits of business.
We did happen to run into Luke at Dunkin' Donuts, which is pretty odd considering the geographical separation between the two.
Well, that Dunkin' Donuts is a geographical oddity, Russ.
It is. But Luke, do you remember what we talked about when we ran into each other at Dunkin' Donuts?
And a metaphysical oddity.
Yes. Yeah. Well, actually, it's funny you should mention that. This metaphysical oddity seems to crop up every single time there's a new season of Stranger Things. So I still think the Upside Down's involved somehow. But yeah. Anyway, so we talked about a little bit of. Well, we had a bit of a debate about what the current console situation is at the moment with the various video game platforms that we have available.
Yeah.
So, Yeah, Chip talked about sort of what's good, what's hot, and I tried to convince Russ to buy a Switch, basically.
He did indeed, and exactly. So if you want to hear us prattle on about consoles, you can check out our latest episode of The Lost Chapters. Now, Craig, if someone wanted to find out more about The Lost Chapters, let's say they wanted to know how to get that information, because it seems like it's pretty hard to find, how would they go about doing that?
Well, they would either just Google The Lost Chapters. No, that might get you somewhere. But I would go to patreon.com and look up the D6 Generation. And then you're going to be able to see what we do there over at Patreon. And if you wanted to kick a little couple coins into the can there at Patreon per episode, we thank you for that. That is how the show supports itself now. This is how the show keeps going. And with your help, where we manage to just barely drag ourselves from episode to episode and from one level of mediocrity to the next. And as a thank you for that, for not kicking in $2 or more, we unlock the entire vault of The Lost Chapter. And if you wanted to go to the d6generation.com and look at the Patreon button, which you'll find on the right-hand side, you can do that too, and it'll bring you to the exact same place, show you the exact same information, and give you the exact same opportunity for middle-of-the-roadedness.
There you go. Very good, Craig. Yes.
After all this time, I have to admit, I love the adherence to branding, because really, you'd think after this many years, they'd finally be the found chapters, but no.
Nope, they are still lost, Luke.
No, that's right.
Because
they're always lost.
If we don't have 100% adoption of the Lost Chapters, then they're lost to someone, Luke.
That's right.
That's how we look at it.
And it all ties in with the Dunkin' Donuts, because anything that happens there in that metaphysical end of the middle of the universe sort of thing, it's always lost.
Right. Mm-hmm. What was once lost could be found, but what if it's lost again?
Oh, yes.
So
that which dies can never die. Oh, wait, no.
Oh, gosh, we better stop. So one other thing we should take care of is that we are in the midst, Craig, of a Stronghold Games contest.
Yes.
We have until the end. You have until the Halloween. So you have about a week from when this is being recorded.
Yep.
But when you hear this...
So any moment from when you hear
this, the contest will be ending within a day or so. So you'll have only moments.
Either you've only got moments or you
hours,
missed it.
Right. But hopefully you did not. Hopefully you submitted your audio blurb about Space Freaks in the voice of the Arena Master. Space Freaks, the hot new game. It's not even out yet from Stronghold Games, and this is the game where you build your own freakish alien combat system, and you send it in to battle other freakish alien combat systems. Thus the name Space Freaks, which is oddly appropriate for Halloween. And Mr. Bonacore was kind enough to give 3 copies away to 3 of the entrants. And all you got to do is record that little bit of audio and send it to info@the d6generation.com, and we will review your entries, listen to them carefully, play several of them on the show, maybe more, maybe all of them, depending on how we get. And Mr. Bonacore will choose some winners, and you'll get some free games. So nothing wrong with that. So hopefully you participated in that. So there you have it.
Quick shout out to Stronghold at the moment. Those guys are killing it right now. I'm loving everything that is coming out.
What's your latest Stronghold game you're playing, Luke?
Well, it's probably more appropriate for me to talk about a couple of highly anticipated ones. I'm going to try and track down a copy of Terraforming Mars for PAX Play this coming weekend. So that's pretty high on my list. I've been hearing a lot of great hype about that one.
Excellent. Yeah, they just came out with the expansion for that, too. That's a really, really good game. Excellent. So, Craig, what's the time now for?
Someone said achievements is
That was the worst achievements in gaming announcement ever, Craig.
I decided to embrace the marble mouth, mouth thing that was going on there.
Fair enough. Achievements in gaming, of course, brought to you by all of our friends over at Patreon. Really appreciate their support. So, Luke, what have you been playing lately for board games, card games, tabletop games? What are you playing?
Stuff. So I racked my brain to sort of think about what I mentioned to you last time we caught up, which was probably about exactly a year ago now.
Yeah.
And I think if you recall, I spoke about a new D&D campaign format we were trialing out about a year ago, kicking off, which was what we called a one-shots campaign. So it was based on like a rotating DM chair. Yeah. So we've since wrapped that one up very recently. So it worked quite well. But what we tended to find towards the end of the cycle for that campaign is that the people who were occupying the role of DM started to sort of dwindle down a little bit, and it ended up being sort of just myself and Ollie, who's actually one of my co-hosts on Party Loaded. So rather than it just being a one-shots with 2 DMs and the others sort of being taken up by various things like having new kids and stuff like that, we flipped it on its head and we've started a new campaign. So Ollie's kind of running the lead on this one, and there is a name for it which it's since escaped me. But the general concept is we're playing 5th ed D&D, but we're creating a whole new world. So it's
there's a song cue there, and I just let it go. I just want credit for that.
You're claiming it without singing it? You cannot claim a song without singing.
You hate it when I sing, Russ.
Cue it.
I want to hear some verses,
whole
Greg.
new world. Okay, there you go.
Well, very good. That was a good one.
Yeah, thank you.
Not bad. He's awake. Cool. So yeah, we are actually creating it together. So all of the players, as well as Ollie's the DM, and we've actually sort of written different locations ourselves without specific names or some of the finer detail. And he's taken all of that and he's mashed it together and put a little bit of his own spin on it. But it means that the world that we're actually sort of existing in is something that the players have largely put together themselves. So everybody submitted a few pages of content. I submitted about 30 because that's what I tend to do. It's working out real well so far. I'm playing a cleric of Kelemvor, so it still maintains the standard sort of D&D pantheon of gods. Cool. All right. Cleric of Kelemvor. I don't know if you recall, Kelemvor was the god of death. He sort of took over from Cyric after the Avatar wars. Yeah. And the cleric of Kelemvor is a very sort of dour sort. He's kind of like a doom cleric. A doom guide is what they're called. So cleric of death, tend to look at things fairly grimly, not a huge sense of humor, which is completely the opposite of how I typically play D&D. So that's a challenge in itself. But it's been good fun. We're sort of running around and doing that at the moment. The world is occupied by some very significant sort of powerful folk. And we've got a system each sort of cycle of the story where each of us secretly rolls some dice depending on what allegiances we've picked for those powerful characters. And depending on some of those rolls, we sort of have them influence more or less as the story progresses. There's some interesting mechanics going on.
Very cool. But, I like how all the players submitted sort of crazy ideas or things for the world, and the DM sort of brought it all together. That's really cool. Very collaborative.
It has been fun, yeah. Different kind of spin to what we're used to, but I mean, D&D is still great, so loving that. Yeah. Aside from that, it's been a little while now, but we have been playing a bunch of Risk Legacy throughout the year. So I've got a gaming group that we sort of rolled on from getting through the Pandemic Legacy campaign and rolled straight into Risk. Got to say, I'm not a massive fan of Risk Legacy, unfortunately.
How far into it are you? So it's still the thing about Risk Legacy. It was the first of the Legacy games, and it's definitely not as story driven as Pandemic Legacy.
Sure.
Are you and fundamentally in the end it's still Risk, right? I mean, in the end, so you have to kind of. Although there are some Endgame scenarios that keep the game from going on forever, which I kind of like. But what do you how far have you gotten? Like, how much of the box is open? Let's put it that way.
So we're just over the halfway point as far as the victory track down the corner of the board goes. Okay. So I'm aware that that's probably not quite enough to form my full sort of opinion on it so far. But, I mean, by the same token, if you're halfway through playing that many games, you should have a reasonable feel for what it is at that point. Right. But I'm enjoying it to a point. I think that we've got the right group for it. But my issue with it is exactly what you just said. It's still Risk. So Pandemic really sort of, changed up quite significantly as the campaign went on, and the story elements were great. Right. I don't mind the lack of story elements so much as I do the fact that the game can still end at the drop of a hat if someone does something stupid. Right. So, Risk is one of those games where if you have one player that overcommits, it kind of ruins the experience for everybody else because it hands somebody a quick victory. Right. So, and that's really frustrating when you have absolutely no player agency in what's occurred. Right. So you kind of get lucky or you don't. Right. Yeah. But I mean, it's still fun. It's just coming off Pandemic Legacy. I think it's probably not a great palate cleanser because it's not. You played them in the wrong
order. I think you play Risk Legacy first.
I agree.
So you remember Risk and you're like, ooh, look what Legacy does to it. And then you play Pandemic Legacy, which quite frankly, Pandemic starts off as a better game than Risk and then takes it to the next level. So you are kind of going, you're kind of seeing the 1950s version of the movie before and after having watched the 2010 version, kind of thing.
Absolutely. We're having the dessert before the entree. Yeah,
exactly.
It's a weird one.
Yeah.
But after that, we do have Seafall, and I can see now we've got Pandemic Legacy Season 2 to look forward to.
Yeah, that's going to be amazing. I think you're going to be happy with it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so it's a good time. Only other sort of real board games or the like that I've played recently to round that list out, because I'm sort of saving everything for PAX, is a bit of Sheriff of Nottingham with the family. So it's definitely a family favourite for us. My sister and my kids, well, my eldest son in particular is kind of at the age now where he understands bluffing, because God knows he lies to his parents enough to sort of get the concept. But my mother unfortunately does not. She constantly declares that she's bringing contraband into the town. So I have to still get her.
I have the contraband.
But if I declare it, it's okay, right? No, Mum. I'm sorry. It's not.
Do you have anything to declare, ma'am? Yes. All of these drugs. And...
Yes. Yep. But yeah, no, that's been a good time. It's still a classic game. I love the heck out of Sheriff of Nottingham.
Yeah. Great choice.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Craig, how about yourself?
What have I been playing lately? Well, let's see. There was a game of Warhammer 40,000. That was fun. Played that against Justin. That was a little while ago. My Nurgle against his Space Wolves. And he had two named characters. He actually had, what's the Dreadnought's name? That was Bjorn the Fell-Handed, which is a crazy Dreadnought. And he had, I can't remember the name of the guy, but I had a named character too. So it was kind of like name on name. And the game ended with only one model living, and it was my model. However, I was doing a whole bunch of things wrong because it was the first game I played with the codex. So there were all sorts of interactions that were going on. So that was kind of wacky. But a lot of fun, and it was a 750-point game, and it lasted for about an hour and a half. So that was a nice time. So that was nice. A good... Yeah,
that's quite long for what I would have imagined that point level in the past.
Well, that's Russ and I are both finding this edition to play a lot longer than any previous edition that we were involved with. So I was happy to have a 40K game that lasted an hour and a half, and that was it.
Yeah.
So then there was you and I had another game of Rune Wars, but did we talk about that already?
I think we may have, but yes, we're still enjoying Rune Wars.
Yeah, we're still enjoying Rune Wars. And then I played, I played Rail Raiders Infinite by Ninja Division.
Oh, yes.
Had a couple guys come over the house and we played that. And that was a lot of fun. That was, it's a chibi sci-fi train heist game, which we've spoken about on the show, but I hadn't actually talked about the gameplay much. And it cannot escape comparison to... Colt Express.
Yeah,
yep, right. Colt Express. Except that if you like really cool looking chibi miniatures and more of a straight up gameplay, then Rail Raiders Infinite will be your game. They take about the same amount of time to play. If you like a little more in depth, you're in Colt Express, you're programming your moves ahead of time, and then you're just kind of like letting things roll out as you go, as opposed to just sort of a straight up gunfight. Rail Raiders also uses a really interesting mechanic in Colt Express. Of course, when you shoot, you hit if there's any target for you to hit. And Rail Raiders, it's more of your regular sort of more familiar miniatures / board game hybrid. So if you're shooting at somebody, you have to test to see if you hit or not. And the gimmick, which I think is actually kind of a cool thing that brings the theme into it more. For Rail Raiders is the dice. It's 6-sided dice, but instead of numbers on it, it has a 9, a 10, and then a jack, queen, king, and an ace. And you roll 5, and you're trying to make a poker hand that beats the other guy's poker hand. So everything is opposed.
Cool.
And it's really neat. And they have a cheat card, and it doesn't go super in depth. Like if I have one pair and you have one pair, Luke, then whoever's pair is higher, it says obviously wins. But it doesn't go into the more in-depth, like if you and I have a pair and they're the same cards, but then you also have an ace, then you win over me, obviously, in poker. But in this game, it doesn't actually say any of that stuff. So it's sort of how experienced your people are that you're playing with poker. And I'm not experienced at all with poker, so there was some confusing moments, but it was still a fun game.
That's neat, though. Like, one thing I really dislike about games that sort of substitute numbers on dice for random symbols is that it can be really hard to kind of get your head around it when you first play. Yeah. But basing it on a poker hand, I think that's a much better way to go, because most people will have some familiarity with that at least. That's good.
Yeah, and I mean, right off the bat, you're at least looking for, you're trying to come up with sets, whether they're the same numbers or letters, or if you're trying to go, like, make a run or whatever. So it's kind of the logic is there. And it's very, like I said, it's very straightforward. You're working your way up this sci-fi space train, and there's all kinds of law bots between you and the loot. And you're just trying to take out the loot. Take out the law bots, steal the loot. The loot represents either money or cool cards that you can take that will give you upgrades, let you roll an extra die that then you have to choose the best 5, or let you re-roll, things like that. Every character has one little special rule that gives them an edge over everybody else in certain circumstances. So it's very basic and simple, but it was a lot of fun. And like I said, the theme goes all throughout, so that was cool. And then I played a run of Warhammer. What is it? The Warhammer Underworlds Shadespire.
Or you can call it
Shadows Spire.
There's some sort of don't throw shade at me, Luke.
No.
Across the globe.
Or you can or you can use it by its acronym, which is Warhammer of Unusual Size, or WUS.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
So we played our first game at that nighttime thing at my house where Russ bailed, and his brother John and our friend Pete came over, and so it was we kind of like played it out. It's a 2-sided game, so Pete sort of just watched and was a wise ass. And then that's why we ended up breaking out a game that 3 people could play. But that was fun. And it was interesting in that the Stormcast Eternals, the good guys, as far as GW ever has good guys.
The Fantasy Space Marines.
Yeah, it's sort of, Sigmarines is another term that they're... Right. Aspersion cast in their direction.
Sure.
They won barely, and John had one more move, and if he had managed to pull that move off, he would have scored every one of his hand of cards that his objective cards that he was holding. Instead, he didn't manage to pull it off, so he didn't score any. So I think I won by 1 point. So the big blue guys won that one. And then Russ and I, on our regular Tuesday night game, we played 3 games of that.
Yep.
Which is one testament to how fast the game is at any rate.
Yeah.
Because the game literally takes about 20 minutes to a half hour once you get the rules down. And the rules are it's fast and bloody. Very, very bloody. And again, all 3 times we played, the blue guys won, but I played the Berserker guys, which I'm sure terminology wise we'll fix later on in this episode. But the red guys, you get 5 kind of barbarian berserker guys versus 3 heavily armored blue guys in the box. And I played the red guys twice and got lost a close game the first time, got crushed the second time. And then Russ again was trying to bail. And I was like, no, you will let me try to win with these blue guys. And I did. But as Russ pointed out, he really basically threw away the first 2 turns with the red guys with making some serious mistakes. And then I only won by 1 point. So it could be that the red guys aren't as bad as it looks from these 4 games. But I think the jury is still out on that, but I think it also might be that this is yet another game that I just can't win.
More about that later, because we're definitely
more about that later. That's right. And then Russ left, and I was sitting around waiting. I learned a lot about Colony, the game Colony. Have you played that yet, Russ? Or Luke?
No.
It's a card drafting game. Reminded me a lot of what was that original card drafting game that we played over my house when Dan came over ages ago. Russ,
I don't remember.
That was the first. Yeah, Dominion.
Dominion's not card drafting. Dominion's
what is it? Because
Dominion's deck building. Yeah.
I meant deck building. That's what I meant.
Yep.
Okay, well that'll explain some other confusion in other parts of the show.
Yes.
So deck building. So it's a deck building game where you're trying to build engines.
Yep.
And our friend Chuck he's awesome. He's super excited about games, and when he's excited, he wants you to be excited. He wants to show you how cool it is. So he was doing that, and I didn't have the heart to tell him the entire time. I was like, wow, this is not my game. But he explained it so well that at least his explanation was awesome and interesting, and kept me there 45 minutes longer than I meant to stay, just because it was interesting to listen to him and his excitement as he explained the game. And then at the end, he was like, hey, next week we could play this. And I was like, please don't get me wrong, but that's just not my kind of game.
Right.
But I really enjoyed your explanation of it. And then he was like, okay, fine, let's play this. And he took out another game, and it was called Skulls. And on the front of it is a Mexican Day of the Dead kind of skull, sort of artistic skull. And it is basically Liar's Dice or Perudo, except instead of having dice, you have each player has 5 coasters. And one coaster has a skull on it, and the other 4 coasters have flowers. And then you have like another coaster that's sort of like your base, and it's got your color dull on one side. That's your starting. And then if you win a hand, you flip it over so it's your bright color. And if you win another hand, you win the whole game. And all you're doing is you're putting out a coaster, and you're going to either choose whether you're going to put in its face down a skull or a flower. And then it goes around again until somebody says, I think there's 4 flowers on the table. And the funny thing is you have to start with all of your coasters. So if you put anytime you find a skull, you lost that hand. So you're trying to, and you have to take them in the reverse order people put them down. So it's very interesting and very simple to learn, like unlike Perudo, which is very complex to at least explain. It's easy once you figure it out, but Skulls was really, really easy because you're like, okay, I think there's 5 flowers, but you have to start by flipping over all of your chosen tiles. So if you accidentally put a skull in and forgot about it, you lose. So then let's say you had 3. Now you have to find among all the other players 2 other flowers before you find a skull. So you could go to me, Russ, for instance, if you thought, Craig doesn't have any skulls or Craig didn't put a skull in, and you flip one of mine over. Then you can choose to flip my next one over or go to Luke's and flip his last one over. And if you manage to find that many flowers before you find a skull, you win that hand. You flip over your thing. And if you lose a random tile. So if you lose your skull, then everybody gains a massive advantage over you if they figure out that you don't have a skull. So it's
rad. I love it.
Sounds cool.
It's very, very easy to pick up on Amazon. It like Chuck picked it up by accident, I think he said, at a local game store, and he's never seen it anywhere since then. I was able to find it on Amazon. It's fun on a tactile level because you've got these really thick coasters, and so you're like just flopping those down and you're flipping them over, and it was a lot of fun. And the whole game with 4 players took less than 15 minutes, so it was exactly as billed as Chuck said. Like, here, this will justify your waiting because it's a cool game that you can learn and play the whole game through in like 15 minutes, and I had a blast on that one. So that was my last game of the preceding period. How about you, Russ?
Oh, cool! Wow, that sounds really awesome. I'll try that.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Bunny Kingdoms, which I've talked about on the show before, is fast becoming the most requested game. Every time I try to get a different game to the table in my house, everybody's like, no, let's play Bunny Kingdoms again. So really, really hot. Again, this is the one where lots and lots of plastic bunnies. You're basically trying to take over the board, but there's also cool little plastic castles. It is a drafting game, meaning you pick 2 cards, pass the hand to the left. But really, really cool. Great, clever artwork and surprisingly strategic. Looks like a kid's game, but this has got meat on its bones. It's great fun. Also, as Craig mentioned, played 3 games of Shadespire, Warhammer Underworlds Shadespire, or WUS. And
Shadespire.
No, it's Shadowspire, not Shadespire.
Is it Shadowspire?
Shadowspire. I'm looking at the box.
Mm-hmm.
It clearly says,
okay.
No, it says Shadespire. My bad.
I was going to let it go.
See, I can't even tell.
I was just going to let it go.
No, this is one of the worst game names ever. I'm sorry, but it is.
I disagree. Sure I think the name is absolutely inspired.
Because you remember it. It sticks with you. It's like, it's just so sticky.
The sticks with some, nightmare with others.
Well, speaking of games that have great names you would never forget, also play Dungeons and Dragons. See, Alliteration Games Workshop. Alliteration.
Yeah. That's what it says.
D&D 5, even playing the heck out of that. And I've been talking a little bit about trying this crazy experiment with my party. And this is the game that I've been playing now for several years. We just finished up. I took the group, my two daughters, my niece and nephew, and my brother. They are the players, and we've been playing now, I think, for 2 years now. And we just got through the first Rise of the Dragon, Horde of the Dragon Queen. We just finished that, and now we've just started at the beginning of Rise of Tiamat, right? Mm-hmm. So, and what I decided to try, I wanted to try to add a little flavor, do something really, really kind of weird. So I told the party, I told all the players, I said, look, after the last session, I said, guys, I want you to go ahead and create, each of you needs to create a level 5 character. And the only rule about the level 5 character is he or she must be a loyal harper. That's it. And so they went off and they created these characters. And then we came to our next session and we kept on playing. Now, in this part of the game, I wanted to really have the feeling of things are becoming epic. So the characters are all, in the 8th level area, and they've gone from like little raiding parties to like there's this really supposed to be this massive feeling of like a global conflict happening, or not global, but a Sword Coast wide conflict going on between the Cult of the Dragon and everybody else. And so there's this war council set up, and the heroes of the mage. And I'm not making this part up. This is all out of the Rise of Tiamat module. But I wanted to give a feeling of like more things interacting and lots of stuff happening. And so I wanted there to be a second squad. And if you think about video games, like if you think about the map that you're having in like open world games, and you can go to choose this mission and that mission. And I wanted to have this feeling like in some of the more recent video games where you can have another squad. Like if you think about Mass Effect Andromeda, you can have these secondary squads, you send them on missions, and then the results of the multiplayer missions affect the overall situation in the world of your main players kind of thing, So like there's like these other squads going on and you're in this involved. So I wanted to kind of give them that feeling. So what I did was I had them create these level 5 harpers. That's all they knew. And then they're going on the adventure and they're getting ready to go to this one area with their characters that are 8th level. So they go in. And my oldest daughter, she has this closet. So she sends the closet into the dungeon, into the basement of this house to find what's going on while they're trying to deal with the guards. And what we do in my party with my group is instead of sending little paper notes, if someone gets special information, we text it back and forth. So the character will say, like, she'll text me and she'll say, like, I'm sending my closet into the basement while no one's looking. And so I can text something back, but I can take quick pictures of things, and say, you see this or whatever, and I sent her a text back and she gets it and she's sitting there and they're working on it and they work their way past the guards and they decide to all go into the basement. And just as the party's stepping into the basement, she goes, oh my God, that's our other characters. She didn't figure it out because I sent her the descriptions of everybody. And so what happens is they go into the basement and they see these alts they had made, these level 5 guys, are all sitting there in the basement frozen. Now, this is all unique story I've made up, so no spoilers now. They're all sitting in the basement frozen, and then I said, okay, put away your current characters, take out your level 5 characters, and I said, and now you're all standing in a steamy jungle looking at a ziggurat in the distance, and you were just briefed on the following mission by your Harper leader, and it's a flashback. So the characters are going to play through an entire flashback of these other characters that's going to inform some of the major side events that aren't really explained in the Rise of Tiamat. And as soon as they realized that was happening, they got really into it. So I was a little nervous that you'd be spending time in the campaign not getting XP against your main character, right? So my biggest fear about this little trick is that they'd be worried that, they'd be like, oh man, we're wasting a half a Saturday because we're not getting XP for our characters, right? But they didn't see it that way at all, which was awesome. They were all like, this is really cool, and how the heck did we get frozen in that basement room? Because now we're back in time, and how's that going to happen, right? And what's more interesting, I think, is it's going to tie to the main story, but what I'm hoping happens is, A, none of them die, because that'll make it hard, and B, they all get to this point, but essentially the level 8 characters will be rescuing the level 5 Harper squad. This will endear them to the Harper agent on the main council, and she's going to give them access and the ability to assign the level 5 Harper agents to various missions as they take on the Cult of the Dragon. So it'll hopefully give them a more epic feel with like a secondary posse and a primary. So we'll see how this all works out. I was really nervous about doing this thing, but they seem to really have enjoyed it. So hopefully it works out. But this idea of having you play through backstory, I thought was something I really wanted to explore. And we'll see what happens here. But so far it's been proving out pretty interesting. So
that is a cool take. I like it.
I'll let you know more as future episodes unfold here. So So that was my regular games. What about modeling? Luke, have you built anything lately? Painted anything?
Oh, I've been terrible lately. I've been so busy with PAX prep and video sort of post-production stuff. But I have been hunting high and low for a suitable miniature for my my Doom Guide. And I'm struggling. So if you guys can suggest anything, I would gladly take any ideas that you can throw at me. So the Doom Guide is a chainmailed sort of cleric, sort of holding a Warhammer, decent sized shield, and I want some sort of skull iconography on the mini as well, preferably sort of built into the breastplate or something like that. I just cannot for the life of me find something that I like. So, I mean, if any listeners out there have any ideas too, hit me up on Twitter, or send an email into the show, I guess, and Russ and Craig will pass it on. But yes, just hunting for a miniature count as modeling.
Sure. Yes, questing for a miniature is good.
There have been far more questionable. Yeah. See, nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah. What's this whole thing called? Achievements. Yes, there have been far more questionable achievements that had less to do with miniatures that have been given credit in this segment.
That's
so I give it to you.
Fine. Yes, Luke, I agree with you. What about you, Craig? What have you been doing for modeling?
Well, I'm still working on the Dakon, the humans for Rune Wars. Horses, lots and lots of horses.
Nice.
But then I took a break because I kept thinking I don't really like the sort of fast and loose. We're going to play with my terrain, the best terrain I have, but I don't have a lot of terrain that could fit for all the terrain that the game calls for. And the game calls for very specific terrain. And so I thought, well, if I had a better bit for my jigsaw, I bet I could cut out these templates and do a better job, because last time I tried, I was chewing through the wood. Later on, found out I was using a metal blade, so that would be why, to cut this little fiberboard. So I have been working on a full set of 3D terrain, and I'm working on my last 3 pieces now. I tweeted out a few shots of what I have so far. I have built 3D terrain from scratch of every terrain piece available in the game so far, except for the latest Elven hero. The hero models come with one piece, or 2 actually, one double-sided template. So 2 types of terrain in their box. And so I have everybody else's terrain. I've got the terrain that comes in the Elven box, the terrain that comes in the starter box. And I've got everything that so far has come out except for that the woman riding riding the giant elk. So that's going to be next time we play. We will be playing with exactly to specifications the 3D terrain, and I'm
tweets
super
look awesome. I can't wait.
I'm
to see these.
super psyched how almost all of it came out. I went a sort of a cheap and quick route on the stonework for the 3. There's actually 3 stone buildings, terrain that centered around stone buildings, and I'm interested in those. Are the last 3 that I'm working on because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I'm not sure that I made the right choice. But they look decent, and all the others look really cool. And there's 16 pieces, so the chance of any of these 3 coming out is not that great. So I'll take it.
Nice.
Yeah, that's me. What about you, Russ?
Not much. Worked a little more on my Gen Con exclusive. I got this little female. She's Signar. She's supposed to be a Squire stand-in model. But I want to use her as really cool. Yeah, I want to use her as a Stormsmith. So because it gives a little variety. Because you always need 3 Stormsmiths, and they all look pretty much the same. So I'm painting her with gray hair and sort of the same paint style as my Stormsmith. I think she looks perfect for that. So working on her. And still working on my Rune Wars elves, but not as far as I want to be. We've got a 3rd player now in our Rune Wars posse.
Yes.
So I'm really excited about that. So our play group has now gone up 33%, Craig. So this is very exciting.
It's actually gone up 50%, Rob.
Oh yes, even better. Exactly.
Yes, right. Yes.
So feeling good about that. I know it's not killing it yet, but I feel like when the 4th faction comes out, Craig, that's the tipping point.
Well, we've actually got another. I mean, Ian is really really big into it. He just he's played 1 game. So
all right, we got this. This, Craig. I feel
but he's building his undead horde.
All right. Yeah. What about other Luke? What about TV shows, comic books, regular books, movies, video games? What have you been doing?
Oh, video games. That's the magic word.
Yeah, that's dangerous. Remember, there's another whole hour later, Luke. So just,
No, that's cool. I'll keep it relatively brief.
Okay.
I think, fortunately, a couple of the things that I've been looking at recently, you have been too, so we can maybe combine them a little. So before we get into that, though, fall TV shows, well, fall for you guys, spring for us. Yeah. So all the DC stuff is back on, so I'm enjoying the usual Arrow, Flash, Legends, Supergirl, Gotham, all that kind of stuff. Legends may have lost me this season, though, I've got to say.
Did it jump the shark? Has it lost its momentum?
Yeah, look, I enjoyed last season, but towards the end, things started to get a bit wacky with sort of rearranging time and reality at the same time, and where they've kind of reset the clock for season 3, I'm not on board yet. I think it's a bit too convenient, so we will see how that one pans out. But yeah, Arrow and Flash are still looking strong. I'm quite enjoying the early stuff with Flash around his arch nemesis for this season, which is the Thinker. So anyone who's a fan of the Flash comics will probably be familiar with him. Gotham continues to be interesting. My biggest issue with Gotham moving on every season is when they introduce a new villain character, they just ram it in your face so hard. There's no getting around it. Yeah, so I think their big one this season is going to be Scarecrow and Solomon Grundy.
I don't care because I love the acting of the villains so much in Gotham. I almost don't care. I just, you know what I mean? Like I just like watching Penguin and Riddler so much that anything else is just gravy, pretty much.
That's true, and they do carry the show for sure.
The only problem I have is I don't really like how Jim Gordon does Jim Gordon. He's got this gravelly voice thing going on that's not really working for me, and so I'm a little nervous. But I am liking what's going on with Bruce Wayne. He's getting a little more mature. The Batman thing's starting to happen. I'm kind of digging that. So that side's kind of becoming interesting to me.
I think that's quite good, yeah. The TV show that's really catching my attention, though, and I'm very curious to see where you're landing on this now that it's a few episodes deep, Russ. Star Trek Discovery, where are you at?
Oh, I'm really enjoying it. So I was a little nervous. The first episode, I liked it, but the Klingons really bothered me. I don't care if they're going to redo the appearance of the Klingons. That doesn't bother me. The obsession with having to have the Klingons always speak Klingon, even when you're in a room full of Klingons, and listen to these poor actors try to make Klingon sound passionate for an hour is, I wish they'd just go ahead and speak English when it's everybody in the room, and just everybody understand they're really speaking Klingon, But that said, because that actually takes me out of the show. Like when that happens, I get distracted from it. I get less engaged. But that said, I'm really enjoying. I love the last 2 episodes. Really like where it's going. I like the sort of the metaphysical stuff starting to happen there. I love I don't want to spoil anything. You got to be careful here, but
it's tough to talk about, isn't it?
Yeah, but I really like the new ship. I really like what they're doing with the captain. I like the main character there, Michael, who's female.
Michael Burnham. Yep.
Yeah, she's awesome. And I just like I like what's happening there, and I'm really engaged in it, and more than I expected. I'm nervous, though, Luke, for the show because of the way they're distributing it. They're making it kind of hard to get. And I'm nervous it's not going to get the ratings they want. And I think if they just put it, they don't need to. They just need. It's okay to charge for it. They should just put it on, PlayStation Network and Xbox and Apple TV and all those as well, in addition to putting it on the CBS streaming, so that making it available to other things, because most people don't want to stream to connect to, pay for yet another streaming service.
So, I think it's going to kill it myself.
Yeah, I think that's
because
kill
way more of my friends who are Trek fans are just not even giving it a try. Yeah. And I would be it's not a stat you're ever going to be able to collect, I think, but how many people are upset because the way they did it, they showed that first big episode and you didn't need the streaming, and a bunch of people. I have a bunch of friends who are sort of casual sci-fi fans. They all watched it, and they came to me like, "Oh, this is going to be awesome! Can't wait for this!" And I was like, "You guys got the streaming service?" And none of them even knew what I was talking about. So I think that really kind of struck a lot of people wrong. So I'm jumping to the conclusion that it's not going to succeed, which then begs the next question. Do you guys think they would let it die, or would they bow down to the pressure and do what Russ is suggesting and open its availability up more?
My biggest fear is that it's going to be another Stargate Universe sort of situation, because that show, it reminded me a lot of this in a lot of the ways that they captured the sort of grayness of the character arcs and the sort of lack of, adherence to the traditional lore and background, and that is a good thing when it comes to new, fresh ideas and great character development, but it can be a bit of a bad thing when it comes to trying to harness the previous sort of fan engine when it comes to the audience that existed beforehand. Right. So, yeah, I've heard a lot of Trek purists sort of throw shade at it. I don't care. Like, I came to the realization this week that I think it's probably the closest thing we're ever going to get to a Mass Effect TV series. So it's really sort of hitting that kind of vibe for me at the moment, and I'm loving it to bits. I think it's really something special. So I hope not. I really hope not.
Yeah, I'd love to give it a try, but I'm never going to get their stream. Now that we cut our cord and we're doing nothing but streaming, I'm already paying for too much streaming that I'm not paying any more money. Especially for CBS, that I can get what few shows they have that I'm interested in, I can get in all the other streaming services I do. So yeah, that's my stance on that.
That's fair. Well, I'll just whiz through a couple other things. So I've recently gotten onto a new anime series, which I've been watching through Crunchyroll, which is quite interesting. It's called My Hero Academia. So my co-host got me onto this one. It's basically a story set in a sort of Japanese setting where there is a generation of people who have kind of been born with what they're calling a quirk. And for all intents and purposes, it's like a superhuman sort of superhero kind of ability, like mutants from the X-Men kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But the twist is that it's manifested in about 95+% of the population. The central character is a young boy who wants more than anything in the world to be a superhero, and he wants to sort of graduate to this superhero academy where he can actually go to school, with all these other people with these interesting quirks and sort of learn how to be a hero. But he does not have a quirk. Like he's realized that he's actually one of the few that doesn't have anything. So the story is really a quest for him to sort of be accepted amongst that sort of superhuman superhero community without having a quirk of his own. But he kind of finds ways around that, which is part of where the story gets really fascinating. So highly recommend My Hero Academia. It's a lot of fun. I'm getting super pumped for some of the TV coming up, though. I mean, Stranger Things we've already mentioned, but my God, I am counting down the days to the 17th of November when The Punisher comes out.
That's good. Yeah.
Oh, my God. Yeah. If anyone says to me that they think that the trailer they released for that recently is not the greatest TV trailer ever made, I will fight them.
All right.
All right, there you go.
Amazing, yeah.
It was
but as far as video games go, Russ, Cuphead. How good is Cuphead?
Oh, Cuphead is... So here's the thing about Cuphead. It went like this. I started playing... Now, first of all, I'm a huge fan of... for those who aren't familiar with Cuphead, so think 1930s era animated film, right?
Mm-hmm.
Made into a video game.
Disney style.
Yeah, Steamboat Mickey, those kind of things made into... But darker than that, because there were some darker ones. I remember my parents had an old reel-to-reel with like Pinhead on it, with some really crazy stuff. But anyway, really dark, the kind of, they're always wobbly. Made into a video game with 2-player, couch co-op, and really, really hard. But in a very good way. And it went like this. Oh my God, this is too hard. To, oh, I'm really liking this, but man, is it hard. To like love-hate. To, wow, is this rewarding when you get a level done? It kind of like went through the progression. Yeah. And my daughter and I, so what's interesting about it is it doesn't get harder or easier whether it's 1 player or 2. It's the same game. So you might as well get a co-op buddy with you. And then the second thing you need to learn is pretty much your primary job in this game is to dodge. Hitting the guy is a bonus, but just dodge, and you'll do much better. But it's so rewarding. What's neat about it is the rewarding part is that every level, every combat sequence, there's random elements to it and different things you see that make it frustrating a little bit because it's hard to memorize the patterns, but also makes it way cooler because of the way they animate this stuff. You're just really interesting to see what other weirdness you're going to see. So because you spend so much time on each level trying to fight your way through it, you really appreciate all the really cool animated detail. So I don't know. I just really, really like it, Luke. And I was worried it was going to be short because it doesn't take many victories to move like to 20% done, 30% done. But each level's so hard, you really spend a lot of time replaying and getting through it. But it doesn't feel like a grind. I don't know how to explain it. I just really, really enjoy it. Are you guys feeling the same way?
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, don't let the cutesy nature of the animation and the soundtrack fool you. It is the game equivalent of holding you down and punching you repeatedly in the groin.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. It's really like, but in a good way, if you can imagine such a thing. Yes. It's great. Like, there's just nothing like it out there. It really in a year, and we'll talk about this later, in a year like 2017, which is just an absolute, smorgasbord of some of the best games that we've had in a long time. This one still manages to stand on its own as an indie game. I had the pleasure of playing it a couple of years ago at PAX Oz, and in its larval sort of state when it was mostly just being billed as a boss rush game. But they've added some platforming elements to it since then as well to sort of flesh out the game a little bit more and give you like an economy that you can sort of purchase upgrades for your characters and things in. But it is the full package. I cannot recommend it enough. I think the 2-player option to play is actually in some ways harder than playing it solo, because it's one of those games where there's so much going on screen that adding another player to that chaos can sometimes be a detriment. So it doesn't necessarily get easier, but I don't know. You'll have to work that one out for yourself.
No, you're right though. I think it distracts you. The second player, because the combat's the same. Like it doesn't scale for a second player, but the second player, because you can save the second player's life also. So two things happen. One, you think it's easier because someone can save you, but the problem is when your friend gets in trouble, you go to save them, which distracts you, which gets you killed. So when my daughter and I play, we kind of have the rule: ignore me. Yeah, I'm just extra bullets on the screen for you. Just ignore me and do your own thing, and we'll get through this together. We do save each other quite a bit, actually, but it's more of a bonus situation. It's such a evilly fun game. It's a love to hate game that's just wonderful.
Better to do it by accident. Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
Yeah. Playing loads and loads of Destiny 2. That's definitely a highlight in the back half of the year. So if you enjoy a good first-person shooter game with a sci-fi theme to it, I highly recommend Destiny 2. There's a lot of content in there to keep you occupied. I've just recently been tackling the raid with a bunch of friends, and that is a many hour affair. You go into that thing, and it's like a adventure that lasts, the best part of a day when you first sort of get in and experience it, because there is a lot of puzzle elements involved. It's a real challenge. You kind of have to, stand on this platform to activate this and pollinate these flowers with this thing that you've got and escape these dogs and stealth around this. It's just crazy. So, yeah, if you enjoy a shooter with some real twists, I can recommend Destiny for sure. And the other big thing I've been spending a whole bunch of time on, and this has been a real fun one for me with my sons, is I actually recently was fortunate enough to secure one of the mini Super Nintendo consoles which have just been released. So Nintendo have done this thing the last couple of years where they've released sort of miniaturized versions of some of their earliest consoles. They did a mini NES last year or the year before, and the mini SNES is the one that they've done this year, and this is one of the greatest Nintendo consoles ever made. There's some fantastic titles on this, and they hold up. I got to say, it's really, really cool having a console that fits in the palm of your hand, which comes with 2 controllers that you can go back and play all the games that got you into video gaming with the next generation. So there's something really special about that, and we've been having a great time. Yeah, super fun. But yeah, that is all a tiny bit of gaming compared to what I'd like to be doing, but PAX looms on the horizon, so things are getting a bit crazy. We've got I'm actually going to be jumping on a plane in a couple of days, and the first thing awaiting us when we arrive is we've got a special fundraising trivia night for the Child's Play charity, which is run by a group of guys over there, one of which, by the name of Ewan Bowen, we actually recently interviewed on Party Loaded. And we, have a great night there, raise a bunch of money for charity, have some trivia fun, and then we're stuck into the bulk of the convention, which for us, because we do the media thing, is kind of, a lot of running from appointment to appointment and catching up with people and a lot of networking. But I am looking forward to, for the first time, the Penny Arcade crew are doing Acquisitions Inc. on stage for Australia. So
that's a fun show.
Cool.
We saw it at PAX East, and oh man, that's such a good time.
Well, they're doing a different spin on it. For us, they're actually, because they've got Mike Krahulik actually running it this time, because Chris Perkins from Wizards is not coming down. Oh, right. So Mike is going to be DMing, and they're actually doing, I think it's a one-shot. They're doing like a Star Wars themed one-shot.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, and they've got a couple of other people on the group of players that aren't normally there. They've got Chris Straub, who's been doing a lot of their C-Team sort of content at the moment, and Jesse Cox as well, who's fairly well known in the sort of online content YouTube community. He's going to be on the group too, so it's going to be a good time. Looking forward to seeing that. So yeah, very cool. That's me.
All right, great. How about you, Craig?
First, I'd like to correct myself. The game that we played was Skull, not Skulls. So if you're looking for that on Amazon, you need to look for Skull. Mm-hmm. Orville, I see this on your thing, Russ. So through episode is it? I think through episode 5 now has been.
It's 5.
released.
Yeah, I've caught up now.
Yeah, and I'm all caught up on that too. And it's the sense of humor is starting to overshadow the heart that I think was in the first few. So I hope it was just an episode or two. It's not overwhelming it right now, but it's more of going in the direction I was afraid it was going to go in that stopped me from originally watching it. But I'm just kind of a little on edge because I still really enjoy it, and I enjoy the world they're creating and the characters they've created. So I'm just a little nervous about that balance. But it may just be from one episode to the next. It might just be a little bit one way or the other, and that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, Nicole and I are still really enjoying it. I can't remember if it was 4 or 5, but in one episode, one of the alien characters, it comes out while they're eating dinner because he eats a whole thing of wasabi.
Yes. Yeah.
And they realize he can pretty much eat anything, right?
Yes.
And it doesn't really mess with them. So they start feeding him random foods. And what Nicole and I thought was hilarious about that is that's the kind of stuff that probably would really happen in real life with friends if there was no cameras there. Like you would never write it into a show, but they wrote it into the show. I just feel like they can explore
I don't need a
things.
camera to feed my friends wasabi. I will do that anytime.
Right. Well, like it's like that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, if you found an alien was really weird and he was your buddy, wouldn't it be like, hey, can you do this crazy thing? Oh, can you do? You know, it's like I don't know. I just thought it was. I just think they're exploring things in a way that I'm really enjoying. So I don't know. We're still really enjoying the show, but you know, it is different. It's very different.
Right. But I mean, that episode ultimately was a really tense episode with a lot of the stuff that was going on and a lot of the moral choices that the characters had to make. And yet there were some jokes that were dropped into those moments that I thought robbed it of that heart and that seriousness that I'm really enjoying is all that like I said, I think it might be a one episode to the next. Still watching Preacher. I feel doomed. I cannot finish this season 2. Every time I sit down to watch it, something happens and I have to. It's crazy. But I really love where it's going, so I'm interested. I like that. At the movies, Karen is a giant Ryan Gosling fan, which allowed me to go see Blade Runner 2049, which was highly unlikely so that I was going to be able to watch it. So I went and watched that, and I enjoyed it a lot. But I will say, if you didn't love the first one, you're not probably going to love this one because it is definitely the stylistic child of the first Blade Runner.
It's Blade Runner. Nothing wrong with that.
It's exactly.
That seems like a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah. If you liked the original, and we have some friends who didn't like it, and so I was like, don't go watch this one then, because this one is. I thought it was a great continuation of the story. It wasn't like a rehash or a reboot. It was a continuation of a fantastic story, but it is very thematically and stylistically in the same vein as the original, which means at the end, Karen was like, wow, nothing happened in that movie.
Well, nothing happens in the first one either.
What do you mean nothing happened? There's a whole list of things happens, but yeah, okay, fine. There's lots of silence in between those things happening.
What I liked was they didn't try to mainstream this. The first one was not a
that's my
mainstream
point.
success.
Yeah, exactly.
And they stayed true to the original in a good way, and they have another cult success here that probably won't do well at the box office, but I don't care. I'm glad that they stylistically were given the room to do this. What I would argue is right. But
yeah. Oh, I'm very, very glad. And it's like Karen fought tooth and nail to stop me from explaining. Like I gave a 15-minute synopsis as we drove to the movies, and she was like, what do I really need? And I was like, please, I don't know what you're going to need. So let me just give you this quick overview. Like I'm enjoying talking about this. Could you just let me do it? And she was like, okay, fine. I didn't realize you were enjoying it. So I gave her a 15-minute broad overview. And because of that, you need to have that background. This is not a movie that stands on its own. I mean, I guess it would on some level, but the heavy significance of the final scene of the movie means nothing to you if you carried nothing from the original movie. Right? I mean,
isn't it specifically the final cut that you need to have watched to sort of understand some of that as well?
I don't know
I don't think so.
No, I mean, I've sort of got. Like in my memory vaults, I've got the 3 basic versions which is very funny. So if you go see the honest trailer for the first Blade Runner, it's very funny. It'll go through the 3 basic director's cut versions. But no, because I think the 3 director's cut versions all tell the same story. They just get more or less heavy-handed on basically handing you on a silver platter the underlying story that's supporting all the non-action, I guess.
Right.
But there are shot for shot, moment for moment correlations between the end of this movie and the end of the last movie that had me in tears. And if I didn't see that first movie or didn't like it or didn't enjoy it or didn't remember any of that, I would have just been like, oh, that's kind of a weird way to end, So it's very much watch that first one if you don't remember it. I mean, you don't need to remember it word for word, but it definitely ties in on many key points.
Craig, I have a question for you, and this
Yes.
is probably a good one for you, Russ, as well. Have both of you seen the lead-up shorts that were released for Blade Runner 2049? So there was 3 of them, just short sort of 5-minute or so mini-movies. They actually lead into the story for this one quite well, and I highly recommend them. There's one in particular with Dave Bautista, who, of course, plays Drax the Destroyer in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yep.
Check it out, because it is some of the finest acting I've ever seen by that man. It's really good.
I'll have to check.
He was awesome in the movie, and I didn't know about those until right after I saw because and Karen harped on this too, rightly so. At the end of every movie, I'm on my phone seeing if there's a post-credit scene. And she just leaned over and went, why don't you do this before you go to see a movie? And while I was looking for a post-credit scene, which there is none, although the music is beautiful, what did pop up were those 3 shorts. So I want to watch those. I have not yet, but I will watch those eventually.
They're good.
Yeah, they looked good. And then let's see, our big fall event. One of the big fall events here is to go to King Richard's Fair Renaissance Festival, which we've talked a lot before. So I had a big plan to do that with my sister and her 2 daughters and my brother-in-law and my parents and Karen and Reese, and we were all going to go. And it poured buckets the day that we were supposed to go. And sort of a dividend of having a well-rounded kid, my son was like, oh, King Richard's Fair, I was looking forward to that. And I was like, but you've suddenly developed this overwhelming love of football also, which is ironic because he won't sit still and watch more than 5 minutes of a game. But I said, we're going to be we would be less than 20 minutes away from Patriot Place and Gillette Stadium where the Patriots play football. So we could do that. He was like, oh my God, that's awesome. And then I looked online and there's this thing that I think is sort of the spiritual forerunner of escape rooms, and it's called the 5 Wits, which is sort of an immersive experience where it's geared a little bit more towards kids than your average escape room. And they started with a few locations around the country, and it's basically almost as if you're going into a movie and you're in these fully realized 3D environments, and you have to solve these puzzles to get from one room to the next, and it's all themed. And there was one for years at Fenway Park in Boston that was Mummy, an invasion of the tomb of the mummy sort of scenario, which is all Indiana Jones like. And I wanted to go there for years and years and years, and it closed down without me even noticing. But there's a new one, and they opened it at Patriot Place. There's other ones all around the country, so I'd highly recommend you look for it if this sounds interesting to you. The one at Patriot's Place has 2 different stories. It has the 20,000 League story, which is very much a Jules Verne. You end up on the Nautilus, and you're trying to restart it. The Nautilus has its engine is conked out, and it's being attacked by the giant squids. So you have to restart the engine, and that's like several different puzzles in this big engine room. And it looks like you're in a movie scene. It's like the scenario is well thought out. The puzzles are very interesting. You have a guide with you who sort of helps you along the way, and I think that's where it scales for different intelligence and maturity levels. We were letting all the kids do all the puzzles and stuff, so the girl was helping them a lot more, I think, than like if you go on a Friday and Saturday night, it's 18 and older. So I think they give you a lot less help. But the puzzles reminded me a lot of sort of Survivor, eliminate, the
tribal challenge.
Yeah, the tribal challenges. Yeah, all kinds of stuff like that. And there was like in the engine room, there were 2 different ones. You have to solve one, then you had to solve the other one. That then opened up this new environment. You were into this big laboratory where There was a chemical defense mechanism that would drive off the squids, but you had to figure out how to make all the chemicals sort of mix in the correct format. You had to do that. Then you had to go in. The diving bell was flooded. So you had to figure out on the bridge of the Nautilus. You had to figure out how to drain the diving bell. And it's a little cheesy, but it was awesome just to go through. And the scenery is great, and the story is cool. And the second one so we did that one, and then the second one they did was an espionage one, which had slightly less impressive sets because you were actually infiltrating sort of an evil global organization. And you had to prove that they had stolen these plans for a specific satellite. You had to prove that they had the plans, prove that they had started construction, and then, if possible, you had to identify a mole in your organization. So you were given clues throughout the thing. We infiltrated through the ventilation system. There was a big laser grid that you had to work your way through with a giant fan in the background. It was all fully realized 3D set pieces. You had to break into the ventilation shaft and sort of crawl through that to open the door to the safe room. They're all just puzzle after puzzle after puzzle, like I said. And then the cool thing about this one was it ends you in this big room and you're trying to solve this puzzle. And there's 5 different endings to the espionage one, which I think is great because we were trying to crack their global network and we failed. And so a giant bomb sort of rose out of this pedestal in the middle of the room with a countdown timer. And there's 4 different stations that you need to use, all work together to try to defuse the bomb. And we failed. And like I said, we had 3 little kids with us, and the woman was like, "You've only got 10 seconds to get into the bunker." And the kids were like, "Oh," running in the wrong direction. And she must have hit a button or something because 10 seconds automatically suddenly became 40 seconds. And I was like, "Oh, if we had those 40 seconds, we could have diffused it." But we ran into the bunker, and the bunker closes, and it feels like you're in this old World War II bunker. And then the whole thing starts to shake, and there's a massive explosion sound, and the lights all go out. And the kids thought that was a little too realistic. Then you have to cannibalize parts within the bunker to get other parts of the bunker working again so you can open the door. And while you're doing that, the bunker must rotate because the door opened onto an exact replica of the room we had just left, but it was all destroyed as if the bomb had gone off.
Oh, wow.
So it was just crazy. Any listener who's done True Dungeon and you enjoyed it, I highly recommend you do this. Each of the scenarios takes about an hour. The production values are just not. I mean, True Dungeon is awesome. It's really, really cool, and it's thematically probably more in line with what a lot of us enjoy. But this is half the price for 5 times the production value, and no sliding disc combat, sadly. But you get what you can. And we loved it. We really enjoyed it. And so that was what we did instead of King Richard's Fair that one day. And then yesterday we went to King Richard's Fair, and it was awesome because it was beautiful weather. So that's me. What about you, Russ?
Great. I definitely want to check that place out.
Yeah, so it's really awesome. Check it out. 5 Wits is what it's called.
Cool. So I got to go through mine quickly here. First of all, I am into the book Updraft by Fran Wild, book 1 of the Bone universe. I'm enjoying this. It takes place. It's a really different kind of take on fantasy. It's fantasy, kind of steampunk fantasy. Everybody flies around with these wing devices on their back, and they live in these what you learned is growing spires that are high above the clouds. It's a really interesting so far story. I'll let you know more in the future as I get into that. Already talked about Discovery, talked about Orville. I am binge watching Parks and Recs.
And why wouldn't you?
That show is so funny.
Such a great show.
Oh my God, we're in season 6 now, and we're going to be so sad when it ends. I'm really loving the show. Also, in now to episode 2 of season 2 of Dirk Gently, and oh my God, is this a good show? First season was fantastic. Second season, the very first episode, I was a little worried, but it's totally fixed. In the first episode, you start out with everybody sort of separated. So the chemistry's just not there because no one's talking to each other. But in the second episode, they're all back, and it's about 30 seconds in, and you're like, this is why I love the show. And it's just such I can't even, and what they did do good again this season, like they did last season, was each season's a different Dirk Gently mystery. And so there is something to solve. So it's one of those shows where it's total comedy, but there's also some serious mystery being solved as well that you actually care about, which is kind of neat. Similarly, The Good Place, which is now in season 2 also, I was a little worried about the first couple of episodes of The Good Place because they had the big reveal at the end of season 1.
Right.
And I felt like they were trying to find their footing of how to make the situation comedy a situation comedy again once you knew the situation, if that makes sense.
Yep.
But they found it. And the last two episodes have been, my whole family's been rolling on the floor laughing. Really, really funny. Really, really, I can't spoil the jokes. Just really good. Also in great television, Voltron season 3 on Netflix. Luke, have you been watching Voltron on Netflix?
No, I haven't. The last sort of Netflixy thing I got to watch was the Castlevania series, but Voltron's on my radar for sure.
Oh, wow. So season 3, so my girl's all-time favorite television show is Avatar: The Last Airbender. So that show, they have watched 5 seasons of that show, and I can't, countless times. I can't tell you how many times they've seen that show. It's literally countless. And Voltron, once we got into season 3, first show, we looked at each other and said, this is as good as Avatar. Like, it is really, really good. It has the right blend of seriousness with silly in a way that I've only ever seen Avatar pull off. And it's just really, really, really fun show. So yeah, Voltron season 3 is nailing it, which is interesting because Voltron as a concept is sort of silly, but they're making it work. Talked about video games. One thing, we'll talk more later about Shadow of War. I'm really enjoying that. We played Cuphead. Also really enjoying Divinity Original Sin 2. So my daughters are playing the heck out of that with me, and really enjoying that. We'll talk more about that later this episode as well. And that's freaking it. We talked about Blade Runner already, so I'm really looking forward to Thor. I can't wait, but I haven't seen it yet, so we'll have to wait on that till we see it. So, whew, is that achievements?
That
Sounds
was achievements.
That was a lot of achieving.
That was.
So here's the final score. Ripley has 147 victory points. Hicks has 132. I have 117. And Hudson has 87. That's it, man. Game over, man. Game over. What the frick are we gonna do now? Put the game away.
Hey everyone, it's time to talk now about our friends over at Geek Nation Tours. Now, if you're at a computer, if you're in your car, just remember one thing, geeknationtours.com. But if you're at a computer, go to geeknationtoursrightnow.com and click on the Tours button right near the top of the webpage. And this is really the easiest way to describe the awesome that is Geek Nation Tours. On this page, you're going to see just tile after tile of all the amazing upcoming tours, the amazing places that maybe as a geek you haven't even thought about, the places you could go to see all the different crossover with both seeing a new place and just, learning about a place and just experiencing the joy of travel, but then also understanding how it ties into your passion, your hobbies, whether that hobby is zombies, whether it's anime, whether it's Doctor Who, whether it's Indiana Jones, Lord of the Rings. Geek Nation Tours has fantastic tours that really take you to the places where these films or other passions occurred, and then you just really see the little nuances, the little elements that make it fantastic. And what's really great about it is, even if you go to New Zealand or whatever and see all the Lord of the Rings stuff with your family, maybe not everybody in your family is a total geek. Imagine going there with a bunch of people who are all geeks like yourself and are really totally enjoying it and freaking out just as much as you will when you see these things. And that's really the magic what Geek Nation Tours has to offer. It's like when you go to that great gaming convention with all your fellow geeks and you're all freaking out over the new board game hotness, where if you're at home saying that, people are like, what? Why are you so excited about a board game? So they don't get it. But Geek Nation Tours, they do get it. And so again, all these great exotic locales, but also the thing to remember about Geek Nation Tours is maybe you want to go to that big gaming convention and it's far from your home. You want to go, you really are going to go by yourself. You want to be people who you can hang out with, understand. Again, Geek Nation Tour is here to help you as well. For example, Adepticon 2017 got a great tour there. You're going to go there with a bunch of other Geek Nation Tour folks. Terrace is going to make sure that you're hooked up with all the best events. You'll get to see some exclusive things, like maybe having dinner with folks like us at the D6 Generation and other podcasters, other famous game designers. A great way to get to know people, get to meet people, and get just really feel at home at these places and then do other great things in the area as well. So there's really no better way to travel as a geek. And if you're thinking about, getting out there and seeing the world, and you are yourself a geek, and you probably are if you listen to this show, head on over and check out geeknationtours.com.
And now, in an attempt to bring a small amount of dignity and decorum to this otherwise base form of entertainment, and I use the term loosely, I am proud to present...
Oh, get on with it. It's time for App of the Ep.
Seriously, Wakeland? I used to have my own segment, and now I'm relegating to announcing this pap...
Hey, you're lucky we still use you. Hey, and welcome to another App of the Ep. This time around, I want to talk about an app called Geostorm, based on the movie of the same name. Now, the movie may or may not be good. I have no idea. It's a movie about some sort of global satellite system which was designed to control the weather and make everyone happy and presumably fix global warming, amongst other things. But, of course, the giant satellite contraption goes horribly awry and causes all kinds of I guess, unnatural disasters around the world. The game, however... regardless of the quality of the movie, the game is a lot of fun, and because it's based on, and I'm trying to remember the name of the genre now, but there's been 2 or 3 games like this. There was one themed on Tomb Raider. There was one themed on Deus Ex. Been a couple others. But basically, it's one of those games where you're moving a character step by step through sort of a puzzle on each screen. So in the first puzzle, there's a bunch of little dots, and those dots are each step your character can take. And there are multiple paths to take, and there are different devices that happen in the room, so you need to backtrack. It's basically mini puzzles to solve. And it's not a time-intensive game because it's not real time. You're basically making sort of like chess-like moves as you go. What I thought was really interesting about Geostorm was it introduced some really cool concepts into the game, this idea of water and floating and different ways you can push and pull objects. Really interesting, really a lot of fun. Great little set of graphics. I love the art direction. And quite frankly, it's making me kind of interested in the movie, which I suppose is its job. But I'm sure the movie is hit or miss, but this game is really a lot of fun. I think it was, I want to say it was like $2. I can't remember if it was free or $2. It might have been free for the first level, and then I think it was like $2 to unlock the rest of the game. So it's not premium or free to play or pay to play or whatever it is. It's just one-time fee, which I like. I like those kind of games. I like the games where it's basically a demo, and then you can jump in and get a full version if you want, and it's still less than the price of a Starbucks coffee. You can't really go wrong with that. So that is Geostorm. I played it on iOS, but I'm pretty sure it's on Android as well.
Thank you for listening to another scintillating edition of App of the Ep, a segment in which,
Hey, less of that. More just getting on with the show.
seriously, Wakeland, you are like school in summer. No class.
Hey, welcome back, and of course with Luke on the show, and his 100th episode coming up, and of course is now the resident expert on video games. Sorry, Russ.
Exactly. I defer to the king here. I would not presume.
Indeed.
Right.
It helps when you only sleep for 4 hours a night. I'm just saying I've got a natural built-in advantage. So yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Once again, yes, and we've seen you use that advantage before to dominate. Yeah, we have that.
And lest we forget, Luke lives in the future, so he is seeing what we are yet to see.
Right? This is true.
I mean, here it is. There it is tomorrow, today.
Indeed. Indeed, tomorrow, today. So we're going to talk about 2017 trends in video games and what these two guys are playing, right?
Exactly.
Is that what
yes.
we're talking about?
That's exactly right. Now, I'm thrilled because, when Rafe was a regular contributor to the show, of course, Rafe played video games, I played video games, and every once in a while, longtime listeners will know, we would sneak in when Craig was, usually this time of year, because Craig, not overwhelmed, but he's very busy at school with his play and everything, and so he's a little He likes it when we kind of sneak in this segment where he can just kind of nap, right, Greg? Sort of nap during the show.
No, I will be avidly paying attention the whole time.
But with Rafe not on the show now, unfortunately, I don't have anyone now to commiserate about video games once in a while. So this is fantastic. So Luke, thank you. Now Luke, and again, as Craig mentioned, puts me to shame in his video game knowledge. So I am here to drink, as it were, Luke, from the fountain of knowledge that is video games from you, sir.
You can drink from my cup because it runneth over this year, I can tell you that.
Excellent. It does seem to be an overwhelming year. What are some, you've obviously on your podcast, you cover video games, 24/7 or at least once a week. So what are you seeing in the last, throughout the 2017, what have been the dominant themes you've kind of seen in video games this year?
Yeah, well, it's actually pretty timely because heading up to the end of the year, on the Party Loaded podcast, we tend to do a yearly wrap-up and talk about some of our... We don't call them the best video games of the year because it's very subjective. We call them our party favorites. So, and the four hosts, including myself, have very different tastes. It's good to get a bit of a mix of opinions. And looking at some of the stuff that you and I are going to want to chat about tonight, Russ, I can see a bit of variation too, which is good. So, but to start with, I mentioned it before, but 2017 has been an absolutely insane year for video games. It has arguably been one of, if not the strongest year in history for the video gaming hobby, which is saying something. And one of the reasons for that is because the various video game consoles that sort of are big in the market are sort of in the middle of their cycle at the moment, if there is a current cycle. More on that later. Yeah. So it's not a situation where the consoles have just been released and they're building up their libraries. We're in the phase now where they have a lot of games out, and the developers that have been working on some of the bigger titles are really sort of hitting their stride and getting that good stuff out there. But in addition to that, this year has just been a cornucopia of different options across the entire breadth of the year. Like, we don't have that glut that we typically have around the fall for you guys, around that sort of September,
Holiday
October,
season.
November.
Right,
season.
yes,
Yeah. It's been spread out much better throughout the year, which has actually made our job in running a weekly video games podcast a lot easier because we have stuff to talk about all the time.
Well, I have noticed that. It feels like the releases now are a little more spread out. It's almost like video games are going through what the TV industry and movie industry did a few years ago, where someone woke up and realized, hey, if we want to launch a show that might do well, but we're not sure about it, why don't we not launch it in the fall when everybody else launches a show? Why don't we launch it during the repeat season and it'll get traction? And after a few tricks like that started working out, now you have, kind of new shows coming throughout the year a lot of the times. And it seems like video games have sort of started to copy that model a little bit.
Very much, yeah. I think that's pretty true. I mean, if anything, we're almost seeing like a second peak season around the beginning of the year, sort of around the February, March time. Yeah. And a lot of developers are gunning for that now. And I'm already looking ahead to 2018 with some of the stuff that's going to be landing around that time and getting super excited about it. So, But not tonight. We won't talk about that tonight.
No. Well, and one thing too, I think that's helped. I don't know if it helps or not, but I feel like you're right. We're in the middle. It's kind of a weird thing. We're in the middle of a console cycle, and I liked your point about are there really cycles anymore? Because while we are in the middle of a console cycle, there's many upgrades happening, or many or larger upgrades depending on how you look at them. Like the PS4 Pro came out, the Xbox Scorpio/X is coming out. But what you're seeing, even when the S came out, you're seeing the resolution bumping up. And for me personally, it was the first year I actually got a 4K TV. And I am starting to notice the difference in gaming quality. So does that also, that little bit of a thing that happens with me when it's like when I get the latest television/console technology, and I got a PS4 Pro last holiday season as well, I'm like, ooh, new hotness. And so I start trying to find those games that actually take advantage. So there's a little bit of that happening at the same time. So it is really an interesting year because it seems like it's all happening at once.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, I thought it might be helpful just to frame some of the discussion tonight to maybe just start off to whet the appetite, if you will, with maybe a very short list of key themes that we've seen emerge in 2017, because this kind of informs the discussion about games specifically. So now the first one I wanted to mention, because this has been one of the biggest surprises this year, and it's sort of come out of nowhere, is we've seen a massive rise of what's kind of originally been a game mode for a number of different games, but it's kind of become its own genre now. Yeah. And that's the rise of the battle royale genre. So anyone who is familiar with the original Battle Royale movie, it's a Japanese sort of action, I almost call it a horror flick, done where a bunch of it's like a neo sort of dystopia in Japan, where school children basically rounded up and are asked to prove themselves in a battle to the death arena where they're all wearing explosive collars and basically they can't leave the island and they have to fight each other to the death. Now, very brutal.
It happens all the time. I see it every week.
Yeah, yeah.
Luke. It's a
That's it. Yeah,
I have posed this as a potential educational upgrade for years, and for some reason,
right, exactly.
Well, this is what Australia's economy is built on, so maybe the US can take some. No, anyway,
it's basically Mad Max, right? It's Mad Max. Everybody knows it. So
Hunger Games is probably a better comparison.
Hunger Games meets Lord of the Flies.
There you go. Well, that's
right.
Yeah, sure.
Bit like that, yeah. So the Battle Royale sort of genre has existed before. Like, it's not new this year, but this year is the year where it's really become a huge success. And there is one game in particular that's driven this, which a lot of people will know the name of because it's one of the top sort of streaming games on Twitch and has a lot of stuff on YouTube these days. And that is PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds.
Yeah.
So this sort of was a mod originally from the Armour series of games, and it was actually sort of a lot of the assets and sort of game engine sort of stuff was taken from that by a fairly notable modder in the community who goes by the name PlayerUnknown, and basically put together this battle royale style game in modern day setting. You're basically running around an island and trying to kill all of the other players on this map. But the things that make it really successful is the large number of players involved. Like it's you're potentially playing up against 100 other people, it's the games are sort of short and bite-sized enough that it's become really, really popular with people. And now what you're seeing is a lot of other franchises actually trying to take a bit of a bite at the pie because of how successful it's been. So you've got Fortnite, which is a game that came out not too long ago in early access on PlayStation. They've now got a Battle Royale mode for their game, which is doing extremely well. A little bit of controversy around them sort of, taking a bit too much inspiration from PlayerUnknown's, but that's a whole other topic. Even Grand Theft Auto Online has had a new mode added to the game, which has kind of replicated the Battle Royale format quite a bit. And it's a common topic these days where we sort of look at all of the other games that are out and think about which ones are going to try and take it as a mode next. Yeah. You'll see your Call of Duties and those sorts of ones pick up the format in some respect.
It'll be a mode in every multiplayer. I mean, Battlefront 2. They'll all start putting it in there. I think you're right.
Absolutely, yeah. It'll be the ones that can support the high number of players in the scenario thing, though, because I don't think it works with like a 20, 30 man kind of game. You really need those high numbers. So, yeah. But that's been a big theme this year. Big theme.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, the second one, which came as a bit of a surprise, but it's been really fun seeing it happen, is Nintendo. Nintendo's back, baby. They are... Oh, my God. They are rising from the ashes like a phoenix this year. It is insane. So, Nintendo was sort of back on people's radars late last year when we had the massive surge of Pokemon Go excitement globally.
Yeah.
So I think you probably remember we talked a bit about that when I was on last year.
We did, yeah.
This year has all been about Nintendo's tapping of childhood nostalgia and the Nintendo Switch, which is their new console, and it is doing very, very well. So
let me ask you this, Luke, about the Nintendo, because I agree. Like I see Nintendo more and more like. I work in a software company, and of course we have a lunchroom where video games show up. And I saw the mini NES came back out, right? And that showed up in the office, and everybody's in there playing old school Nintendo games. And of course, Pokemon is still huge, and the Switch is out there, and it was pretty hot and in short supply for a while. But you know who I cannot get to try? My kids don't care about it. Like they look at the Switch and they're like, that does nothing. Now they like Pokemon, and they keep telling me when Pokemon's on the Switch, because they still have their DS only for Pokemon, and when never been into Mario, and I wonder, is Nintendo playing on nostalgia too much? Like I think that, and maybe you tell me because you see this more. Like, are they really penetrating to the younger demographic, or are they still just really appealing to our generation, bringing back the old school stuff over and over again?
I truly think both, but they're in a really unique position in the video games market because they've got obviously their closest comparable competitors being Xbox and Sony.
Right.
They kind of don't want to do the same thing that they're doing because at the end of the day, when it comes to the raw computing power of those consoles, they are not keeping up at the moment. They're sort of not trying to compete on that level. What they are trying to compete on is the level where they have some of the best first-party games in the market, and a lot of them are of existing sort of long-running and very successful franchises, and that's where they're really sort of drawing the player base in. But coupled with that, they've also got this really unique situation, which, if anyone wants to hear about this in a bit more detail, we actually covered it in the Lost Chapter episode that probably went up recently.
Yeah. Yes.
The actual Switch platform itself is built to be mobile as well as fixed sort of when you play at home. And it does both of those things very, very well. And it can kind of you think it would have the risk of being a jack of all trades and master of none, but it's actually had the opposite effect. Because of its versatility, it's actually become a very, very popular option for a lot of people. They're doing very well at the moment. And there are some sensational titles on Nintendo's docket at the moment. So, yeah, it's been a good year for them. Very, very good year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the third one, which is kind of more of a recent theme, but it's worth mentioning because it's been a pretty big thing this year. There's been quite a bit of controversy around the implementation of various in-game purchasing systems, particularly in AAA titles. So some of the
loot box backlash, right, Luke? I mean, it feels like we have had enough with the loot box situation. Yeah.
Well, they've always been around, and we can't sort of escape them. A lot of it comes from the mobile game market because the mobile games are an interesting case because people, for some reason, it's just a cultural thing. They often don't like to spend a lot of money on mobile games. For some reason, they just don't see the value in it, despite the fact that there are some really good ones out there. So the mobile game manufacturers, of course, trying to offset the cost of their development by including microtransactions in their games so they can have an ongoing sort of purchase cycle. But what we're seeing now is a lot of the bigger developers, and EA is one that's been particularly on the radar over the last couple of days because there's actually been some news released about a patent that they filed in 2015, which is all about some sneaky systems in their games that drive consumer behavior in particular directions to better use microtransaction systems. Yeah. And it's all very shady sounding, and they assure us that they haven't implemented any of this in their games yet, but you don't file a patent without the intent of doing that at some point in the future.
You would think.
So, yeah, you would think, yeah.
What's your take on it at a high level? Are you at a point now where you won't buy a game that has loot boxes in it, or what are you thinking?
For me, it's a balance. I don't think there's an absolute black or white with this because it really does depend on the game and it really does depend on how it's implemented. To give you one really good example, like one of my favorite games of all time, which I have spent probably about 1,200 plus hours playing over the last few years, is Hearthstone. So Hearthstone's a collectible card game. I play a lot of it on mobile and on PC, and it is in every way a collectible game like you would imagine Magic the Gathering working, just in digital form. Now, obviously, a game like Magic, you have to buy card packs. So, and those are blind purchase sort of packs that you pick up. But the game is built on that. That's its foundation. And Hearthstone actually sort of seeks to recreate that feel. And they can't do it without including, loot boxes, which are basically their card packs. So for that reason, I don't have a problem with that kind of format because you know what the game is when you're getting into it, and it's kind of what the whole, game is built around. What I don't like are games that don't need that at all, particularly single-player ones, where vital content is sort of hidden behind a paywall, which is completely unnecessary, and ones particularly that impact any competitive formats that the games have with people online, because you don't want to pay to win, because that's not a whole bunch of fun. Because if the person with the biggest pocketbook or wallet has a distinct advantage, then that's not real good to be in that environment. Yeah. So and there are a couple of games in particular that I have steered away from in the last month or so because of that. So yeah.
Well, I just wanted to clarify for some listeners and Craig. So loot boxes are, I think you're right in the comparison to Hearthstone, but indeed to Magic. I think the root of the concept of loot box does come from collectible card games, which this idea that you get blind purchase items for your video game, It definitely comes from the cell phone market. And I don't really mind it there so much if I'm not paying for the game. So the game's free. And then later, I have microtransactions typically around loot boxes that do random things from extending the game time to whatever. I feel less bad about that because I do feel if I'm enjoying the game, I should give the developer some money in some format. But what's happening now is you're getting games that are particularly single-player experiences where the loot boxes can be perceived and in some cases are required to advance or to get through all the experiences of the game. And I think that's where some of the controversy comes. I don't even mind. See, I think this is where maybe some hardcore gamers, I might differ with them a little bit. I don't necessarily mind if I can't max out a level in a game, for example, like in an RPG without loot boxes, as long as I can complete the main story. So if I can complete the main story without loot boxes, I'm fine. And I think Overwatch is another great example where they have loot boxes are their jam, but they're all cosmetic, right? There's nothing in the loot boxes actually affects gameplay. So there's no reason to need one. You just want it because you want to look cool, and that's different. But Shadow of War, which we'll talk about later, has come under a lot of controversy around this, and I think it's kind of highlighting what's frustrating people about it because it's a AAA title. It's a great single player experience. But the loot boxes can be used to supplement just regular drops you'd get from what would normally be farming. And so there's a bunch of different schools of thought on whether that's a good idea or not, right?
Speed things up, yeah. I mean, as a trend, I think we can be pretty safe in the knowledge that it's not going away anytime soon. My co-host on Party Loaded, Ollie, actually, we did a big segment on this topic exactly about a week ago for episode 99. And he said it best during that segment. He basically said, games companies have found a way to monetize the easy mode.
Yes, exactly.
So,
that's right.
Yeah, instead of a button in your menu now, you pay for it, and it speeds things up for you by making things easier. So
and that's the way I avoid it, because the way they monetized the easy mode before loot boxes was where those god awful I call them strategy guides, right? So you'd go to GameStop back in the day before you download everything, and you'd buy your game, and of course they try to upsell you on a strategy guide. And I always would tell the guy I don't want one because I always find the moment I buy the strategy guide, I stop playing the game. Because basically the strategy guide is the easy button, and you can't help but look ahead, and then all the wonder goes out of the game. So I'm with you. I think a lot of these loot boxes, you get a good loot box drop. Quite frankly, I don't even like the random drops that happen. So in Shadow of War, I just got a random drop from a random opponent. It wasn't even a loot box that gave me a really powerful weapon, and in Shadow of War, there's no level cap. So sometimes the way they compensate for this, like in BioWare does this with like some of their games like Mass Effect, you might get a great item you find somewhere, but you need to be level 20 and you're only level 5, so you got to wait to be able to use it. But in Shadow of War, you just start using this stuff when you find it. So if you get lucky, all of a sudden you could be a little OP earlier in the game than you intend.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, should we talk about Shadow of War then? Because I'm very curious to hear your take on it.
I'm already so I definitely wanted to talk with Luke about some of the games we've been playing lately. And so so here's the thing about Shadow of War. So I enjoyed Shadow of Mordor. However, I felt it to be repetitive. So I got about halfway through Shadow of Mordor. Now, my brother and some other friends really played it through. They liked it. It's very tactical. I mean, it's a very much, for those who aren't familiar, it's essentially sort of very close to Assassin's Creed, but set in Middle-earth, essentially, right? I mean, it's a very Assassin's Creed type experience in my mind. And I love the Assassin's Creed sort of genre / gameplay style. So, it's kind of stealth, but you can also fight your way through everything, and you got all these different options, and the fluff is there's a ring wraith inhabiting your body. Well, a wraith type piece. So you're kind of a cross between ring wraith. And the real cool part about Shadow of Mordor, which also exists in Shadow of War, is when you die, you don't reload the game. The game just keeps going. Your death is part of the story. You respawn because you are part wraith, so you can relive. But the orc who killed you gets essentially the XP and the glory for killing you and ranks up. And now you've got a vendetta against that person. One of the nice twists in Shadow of War is sometimes when he kills you, he'll literally pick up your sword and break it. And I had this happen. And he snaps your sword. This could be like that level 15 sword you just got, and you're all excited about it. He'll snap it, and now you just lost that great piece of loot. However, if you do eventually kill him, you can then reforge the weapon he broke, which is kind of neat. But that the other...
Very cool.
The two things about Shadow of War that intrigued me was in some of the trailers, they really seemed to be hinting at there's a lot more personality and voice acting in the orcs, and I'm a huge orc fan from 40K days. So anybody who does orcs in the spirit of sort of the 40K orcs, I'm already in, and they definitely do that in this game. And the second part was just seemed like there was a more compelling story in general. So Shadow of Mordor was really about the genre, the experience, almost if you think about the early Assassin's Creed, where the story wasn't as strong, but there was just this really interesting experience, but it got repetitive. Shadow of War felt like they fixed that, so I was really excited to try it. I'm happy to say, we'll get to loot boxes in a second, but that aside, I feel like they have. So I'm about, I've just started capturing my first fort. So you go from, in Shadow of Mordor, you're really just going around fighting orcs on your own and doing some things, but in Shadow of Mordor, you get the power to actually recruit orcs under your will, and they follow you as if they're their own followers, and you can build an army. And then you build these armies, and you recruit generals, and you promote generals, and you send them on assassination missions, and you send them on, and then you go and attack enemy forts and siege them. And the scale and the voice acting. I mean, I think the guy, there's an orc called Bruce who I'm pretty sure is voiced by the
Bruce
guy
the Chopper.
Yeah, but isn't that the guy who voiced Bruce in Finding Nemo? Because if it isn't, he's a dead ringer. He sounds exactly like him.
I have no idea.
I would swear if you close your eyes, it's Bruce from Finding Nemo. But in any case, it's hilarious. The dialogue, the writing, the voice acting. There's a really good story here that you actually care about, and they do even the side missions with Shelob and everything else is really interesting and compelling. So and I like single player strong story. So I'm in. What worries me a little bit is the loot box system. However, so far I have not spent a penny on loot boxes, and I'm doing fine. And I haven't felt compelled to buy any. You do get in-game currency that lets you buy loot boxes, because you basically the only thing you're doing with in-game money is either unlocking slots, for upgrades, which is sort of typical in most RPGs, or you can spend them on random loot boxes just for random loot. But I'm just ignoring the loot boxes essentially, and I'm just completely ignoring them, and I'm not having a problem with it. So I'm really enjoying it. I would recommend it to people who are any Tolkien fan who likes the Assassin's Creed sort of play style / genre. I think there's a lot to like in this game if you just ignore. And my sort of way I'm protesting the loot boxes, I'm simply refusing to spend any real dollars. I spent my initial money on buying the game. I bought a digital copy, and that's all I'm going to spend on this game, and I will get as far as I can get. And if at some point I hit a wall without a loot box that can't proceed, then I will be sad, and I will quit the game. But I expect to be able to solve it. I think it's solvable without having to go the loot box route.
Absolutely, yeah. So Shadow of War is an interesting one for me, and it's actually one of the two that I have deliberately steered away from because of partly the loot box stuff, but also for a couple of other reasons. The biggest one being that there's so many other things to compete with it for time at the moment. So, yeah. And so if there's another game in my list that gets a slight edge because this one has loot boxes, it's probably going to get a look in before this does.
Well, that's a good point, though, Luke. There's so many good games out there that if there's any negative press about a game, right, deserved or undeservedly, I think people will steer away from them. So you really got to be careful as a game creator, I think, in a market that's so gamer rich right now. You really got to be careful, I think, doing some of these things. I don't think you can depend on the fact that you're a AAA title that had a successful first hit because there's so many other options.
Yeah. So how do you feel that they actually approached the lore in the game from a Tolkien fan standpoint? Because the impression I'm getting is they're playing a bit fast and loose with some of the stuff, like particularly Shelob's a sexy lady now. So
yeah, well, there was so Craig, you can chime in on this. So
okay.
So in the game, and this is not a spoiler because it happens like in the very first 5 minutes of the game, maybe 10. Shelob shows up.
Okay.
And she
as
shows
a spider or as a woman?
Well, she shows up as a spider. So you're walking through this cave. There's spiders everywhere.
So it's Sheila.
She comes over this thing. Well, he says her name like in 30 seconds too. So she's a giant spider, as you'd expect, right? She looks very much like the giant spider in the movies. But then she sort of sneaks up on him behind as a spider, and then when the hero turns around to face her, she is transformed into this beautiful woman, and she talks to him in the form of a woman. Now, what you don't know, right? So at this point in the game, what you don't know is Shelob in his head? Is she still a spider and you're just seeing what's in his head? Or is she able to transform to a sexy woman? And I will say this. So if you read the Silmarillion, and Craig, you know Tolkien way better than I do, I think there are hints that Shelob is more than just a overgrown spider. There's something more to her and her background. And she's definitely super intelligent. But whether or not she can transform into a sorceress or something else is not something that's directly addressed in the books, though, right?
I don't remember most of the stuff that I once knew about Tolkien, but as well the more obscure stuff.
Right. Well, she's the spawn of Ungoliant, isn't she? And yes. Ungoliant, I'm pretty sure, is not a spider, but I could be wrong about that.
Right.
No, I don't. I don't.
But I haven't got to the end yet.
I see. I keep back remembering. I'm remembering all the spiders that are her children. So my memory, I keep going, oh, no, she's a spider. But then I keep thinking, oh, wait, no, those were
you definitely have the feeling like there's spiders everywhere, and they're definitely her spawn. And spiders are a major component of the story. But what I don't, and this is the thing I don't know, Luke, like I don't know if like she's in his head.
Yeah.
Because you never actually see her really touch anything other than the ring as a human form, right? So it could be one of those things where it's a mental game, and I don't know how many people who are currently concerned about that have actually gotten to the end of the game to know, right? And I don't I don't know if that's revealed either. So that's a theory on my part. Given how I think authentic they were to the story and the lore in the first one, I'd be shocked if they took a whole left turn, but maybe they did. I don't know.
What's this game called?
Shadow of War. But you can just probably look up Shelob and look on the wiki somewhere, and I'm sure it'll tell us the various theories about her prior to this video game. So there may be some theories that she can shapeshift or at least project. I mean, there was definitely some. Anyway, so I don't know, Luke. What's your thoughts on that? Do you feel like that's the biggest one I've noticed? I mean, the biggest shift. Or thing I was surprised about, I guess, as a gamer. But it didn't bother me because, again, I thought she was projecting to his head, actually, my first thought.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of really good press about the game. Like, I would be excited to play it because I think it's definitely my alley. Huge Lord of the Rings fan, as a lot of us are. And the Nemesis system that they have evolved since the previous sort of Mordor title seems like it's working very, very well in this one. The loot box thing did turn me off a bit, and it's kind of, as I mentioned a second ago, it's just a case of, that just counts against it when it comes to all of the competition it has for my attention at the moment. But I am confident that it's a good game. I may turn around and get back to it at some point. But I think that your approach is probably a really good one, Russ. If you can play the game without having to feel pressured into making in-game purchases to get over certain humps, then that's probably the way to go. I have heard that the grind around the fourth act is where it gets a bit trickier, so you might not be quite up there yet. But I'm curious to see how you go when you get a bit further in.
All right, I'll let you know. So what's one of the games that's really got you hooked right now?
Well, I'll start with some slightly more recent ones. So the big thing that I've been spending the majority of my time playing over the last month or so has actually been Destiny 2.
So convince me why. So here's the thing. So when the first Destiny came out, I was really excited to play it because I thought it was I'm not a big MMO fan, right? But I was thinking, well, it's an MMO with a story. And I was disappointed in the story. Now, I know later they did a lot of work but I was checked out. I was done because there's too many other cool games. So I didn't really go back to Destiny. Now, with Destiny 2, it seems like there's a lot more story there. So I'm kind of like, I think I'm with you on Destiny 2 the way you are with Shadow of War. So it's kind of like, I think I should be playing it, but I'm not.
Yeah.
Why should I be playing it?
Okay, well, probably the one-line elevator pitch for Destiny 2 is that it is one of the smoothest and best-feeling first-person shooters available on a modern console right now.
That's because it's Bungie. They've always had that skill. They're
absolutely. Yeah. It feels great to play. It's very, very smooth, very, very fun, and it's a hell of a good time. In terms of where they sort of come from Destiny 1, there was a lot of backlash when Destiny 1 first launched that the game didn't quite live up to the lofty promise that Bungie had sort of established in the lead up to the release. And they came good on that with a number of subsequent expansions over the year or two that sort of followed. And it was around the time that the Taken King expansion launched for Destiny 1 where it really sort of started to reach that point where it was becoming a big game again. But it kind of lost the momentum by that point. So, the crowd that were playing were kind of the Destiny hardcore fans, and it didn't have that sort of new release excitement that you have when you first drop a game. Destiny 2 has learned a lot from that, and they've come out of the gate swinging. So it is a fantastic iteration on the first title. They have advanced the story somewhat in the fact that there is a story this time.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, it's a little unfair. I mean, there was story in the original Destiny game, but the weird thing was that there was a lot of mystery and mystique around it because a lot of the tidbits that you could sort of hunt down existed outside of the game.
They were in the cards. It was almost like there was a story like WoW had a story, which was it's all like hidden in the world. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like it wasn't like a movie story. It wasn't like one of those first-person shooter AAA titles where you're like led through the story.
Absolutely, yeah, and there's a lot more sort of easily digestible story content in Destiny 2. I wouldn't say it's its strongest feature by far. I think it's a great feature. It's not what I would sell the game on, but there are some really, really good elements to it. Like some of the new cast, in particular, there's an Exo, which is kind of like a humanoid android character. Called Cade 6, who's actually voiced by Nathan Fillion, and he's great. He's hilarious. He plays a pretty significant role in the story content for the game, and there's a couple of other supporting cast members that are very, very good too. There's a character whose name is escaping me at the minute, voiced by Gina Torres from. She's recently been in The Suits, and of course Zoe from Firefly. So she plays the Warlock character whose name's escaping me at the moment. The cast members really sort of drive that story along quite effectively. And there is a lot to do in the game. I think it's probably the biggest selling point with Destiny 2 is that it's a game where there is tons and tons and tons to do. You eventually run out of content if you play it every day, since release and do absolutely everything you possibly can. But for a game of its nature, it's technically not an MMO. Like, I think a lot of people actually get that wrong. The way that I would define an MMO is it's got to have that massively multiplayer sort of setup where you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people sort of existing in that same environment on the same server. What Destiny 2 does is it kind of instances different areas of the world. So you might maybe have like a dozen or so coexisting in that same place. But because it's not one centralized world where everybody is, I don't think it's quite the same feel as, say, like your World of Warcraft. So... but that being said, you can team up with friends. The matchmaking systems in it are much more evolved than what you would have seen in Destiny 1. So I've been spending a lot of time playing this game on PS4 with several of my closest groups of friends and my co-hosts on Party Loaded, and actually getting in and doing some of the sort of team missions and the Crucible matches, which are like the PvP content. And it's great. It's just a very, very high quality game that offers a lot of content. The story is good. It's exciting. It's the replay value is very, very high. It just does everything well. So
nice.
That's my pitch to you on Destiny 2.
Well, it sounds good. I definitely want to play it, but I have to say the second game I really wanted to talk about is sucking up more time than Shadow of War, and that is my daughters and I just discovered, so my wife, as many listeners know, is an automotive journalist, so she travels sometimes on weekends. And so when she does, my daughters and I go and try to find games to play together. And we are always on the lookout for cooperative games. And listeners will also know both my daughters are huge into fantasy role-playing games. And when I started to hear about Divinity Original Sin 2, I was like, well, this seems like a game I have to try. And then I was happening to leaf through Game Informer because they sent it to me for free because GameStop. And it got a 9.75. Now, there aren't too many games that score near to 10. And so we were like, we got to check this out. Luke, have you played Divinity Original Sin 2, or did you play the first one?
I have played Original Sin 2. I was bullied into playing it by my co-host, Jamie.
Okay.
She's been trying to get me to play the original Divinity for a long time now, sort of off the back of us all playing D&D together, because it is one of those games that is actually suitable for running a online D&D campaign should you choose to use it like that.
Yeah, so this game, I think, more than any other RPG ever made, and I know this is a very strong statement, and I've played a lot of them, Divinity Original Sin 2 really does deliver on a couple of promises, even more than like Pillars of Eternity and some of the other recent ones, and sort of the return of Baldur's Gate. And all of us fondly remember, Baldur's Gate and the Gold Box series and all the other great games that really captured or tried to capture what tabletop RPGs were like, and maybe put them in a video game that you can play through. I would say Divinity Original Sin 2 does it top to bottom right. So the character creation is so in depth, to the point where it was just some brilliant design decisions around like tagging. So when you pick your background, like you think about how you create your character in D&D, you pick a background, you pick I'm going to be an orphan, I'm going to be a hermit. You have the same sort of thing here, and they're essentially tags. But these tags aren't just for fun. They actually come in dialogue trees and other skills and abilities. And so the options are almost limitless. And really the best way to describe this game is basically pen and paper RPG in a computer. I mean, I don't mean if I say it that way, it sounds like it's sort of, a virtual tabletop sort of system. And while it does all that, which is even crazier because there's a DM mode and 4-player co-op, so 4 players can come in, the DM runs the event, and you can play it that way. Even in the single-player experience or in the co-op experience where the video game's main story is being played, it still feels like you can do frickin' anything. There are so many ways to solve problems, to advance quests, and even in combat, because combat is turn-based tactical combat. It's not like Diablo-style, button mash, just blow things up against mobs of enemies. It's much more XCOM turn-based tactical. But you can do all kinds of crazy stuff. Like there's a barrel of oil over there, and you've got a glove of teleportation, which you think is designed to teleport players, but you can also teleport the barrel of oil on top of an enemy, have it drop on them, and then, force push another guy who's on fire into the oil and set the whole area on fire. I mean, you can do pretty much, if you can think about it, and you can probably make the combination of magic/activities work in the game. It is just, and that's just all the things you can physically do, but then there's the level of writing, the storytelling, the voice acting. I mean, everybody, there's a speak with animals spell or ability, and every frickin' animal in the game is fully voice acted, and you can talk to them all, and it's
blows my mind.
The depth of this game is it's like, I don't even know. I can only tell you, if you are an RPG fan and you have not played this game, you are missing what is arguably the greatest RPG ever created. Am I overstating it, Luke?
No, I think that's pretty fair. It's a game that's been in development for a long time, and it has been available to play in early access. And I know a number of people that sort of played it before it launched recently with the full kit and caboodle. The voice acting was a late addition, though, and it blows my mind how much of that they've actually included at the late stage of development. It is incredible. But yeah, I haven't felt this way about a RPG since the days of playing Neverwinter Nights, which was one of my all-time favorites. So
my kids too are sucked right in, and they're fans of like Dragon Age and Mass Effect and Skyrim, and this one sucked them in like in 2 minutes. It wasn't even close. And what's brilliant about the character creation is you can do whatever you want with your character, but then they've got a bunch of pre-made characters with full voice acting, full voice acted history, so you can play the game in sort of like an Assassin's Creed kind of, or a Witcher kind of way, where you're playing with a pre-built character with full voice acting and a whole backstory, right? Which actually matters in the game, which is even more amazing. Or you can create your own character completely from scratch, but whatever tags you pick, give them a backstory too. So when you're in conversations, this is what's really cool. Like when you're in a conversation, not only do you have a bunch of different choices you can respond with, but then it'll say, well, because you're a fighter, you can also threaten the guy with this sentence, or because you happen to choose backstory of scholar, you can challenge his theory, but also because you happen to have picked the tag, you happen to be a magical alchemist on the side, you can also try to poison him. Like there's all these different, it's really insane how much of it's there. Like I don't know. Yeah. I don't want to oversell it, but it's hard to overstate how good this game is. It was really shocking. Well,
one of the things I'm planning to do, sort of time permitting, after PAX Australia next weekend, is to get the team together and maybe create a short video series where we actually, run a campaign and capture it for our YouTube channel. So I think that'd be a lot of fun. But no idea how much work it'll be, so we'll see.
Well, I think it'll be a blast, and I think what's even going to make this more, I think this could rival Blizzard in terms of ecosystem for like a Diablo game, because they've got it so not only can you create multiple DLC, main primary stories, which I'm sure they'll create more of, but also in the mode where the DM can create. It comes with a great pre-made little like sample, learn how to be a DM and run your players through it. But then you can create these things yourselves, and there's a whole market situation. So I can imagine very quickly lots of great fan-created content and a quick ecosystem being built up here of great mods and great systems and great modules you can just run and play with. And I think it could really be huge. So I hope I'm encouraging all our listeners to go try this game because I think you'll love it. And that just means that more people will be playing, which means more people make great content, which makes it better for everyone. So I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to switch over to a handheld game for the next one I want to talk about.
Sure.
So I've recently been playing the sequel to the greatest video game ever made. And that, of course, the greatest game is Super Metroid. We all know that. So the sequel is the new 3DS title, which is Metroid Samus Returns. Ooh. So this was originally published on Game Boy way back in the day as Metroid 2, but it's been remastered and re-released, and they've basically built this game again from the ground up and added a lot more sort of modern elements to it. It is hands down my favorite 3DS game. It is absolutely sensational. It captures all of the feel of the original Metroid 2D platformers. And it is just an absolute wonder to play. If you enjoy puzzle platformers and you enjoy the Metroid sort of series and old school sort of Nintendo games like that, you cannot go past this game. Russ, I know that you've got a fairly 3DS household, so I know both you girls play 3DS games. Is this something they might be interested in? Are they?
I have to get them. They have never fallen in love with Metroid, but that may be on me. So I should poke them in that direction. Fun story about Metroid. Metroid is a really interesting video game history, and the original Metroid was the first video game, and it's often talked about because I'm in product management. I'm involved in software development, and so one of the things that's very common nowadays is progressive complexity. So when you build software, what you want to do is you want to start with your software usage pattern being very simple and add complexity as people learn how to use it. So almost all video games nowadays do this, right? There's no books. You just go in. And you learn how to walk, and then you learn how to jump, and then you learn how to use your jetpack, right? Well, Metroid was the very first video game to do this. So when you first started playing Metroid, the very first thing, it didn't teach you to jump and bounce and go to the next level, and you couldn't progress to the next level until you learned the new trick, right? And so each level taught you a new trick. And Metroid was the first real game to do this, and it's still talked about in product management and in marketing in some cases on how to engage people in this way. And every video game since then, or a lot of them after that, have started doing it, but Metroid was the first, which is kind of a neat story.
Yep, makes sense. They do it very well in this game too, for sure.
They do. That's the thing.
It's a bit different to your traditional Metroid games in that your sort of goal this time is to actually go to the Metroid homeworld and hunt down about 40 of the things. So each one of these sort of Metroids floating around, which, for people who aren't familiar with the franchise, Metroid's a very aggressive alien that looks like a floating soul-sucking jellyfish, basically. They sort of exist in this game as mini bosses, and by the time you sort of get around to each of them, they have evolved a bit. So there's some variation when you fight each of them, which creates part of the challenge. But oh my god, is it good! Yeah,
that's awesome. I'm glad it's great because it's a great series. So I'm glad it's good. I wanted to mention this one, Luke, because I don't know if you've played this one, and this is not my cup of tea normally, but my oldest daughter, who is now for her 15th birthday, asked for this game, and as I mentioned, I did get a PS4 for the family Christmas time, and it was partly for me because I've always wanted to play Uncharted. More about that later. But and some other PS4 games. And I was excited about Horizon Zero Dawn and some other stuff. But I figured they'd like some games, but none of them caught their fancy until Persona 5. And so for her birthday, my oldest daughter wanted Persona 5, and she fell in love with that game over the summer, in August, before school started. She literally played it pretty much every chance we'd let her sit down in front of the thing until she solved it, which was quite a bit of time. It's a very long, this is a 100 to 200 hour game. It is an interesting RPG. So essentially you're high school students who by day are going to school and establishing relationships like normal high schoolers do. So think sort of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But by night, instead of slaying vampires, you progress into this alternate sort of dream reality where you do war with nightmarish creatures, and for some reason everybody dons masks. And there's this sort of shadow overlord guy who's sort of giving you orders, and you're not really sure what's going on with him. And there's a talking cat that turns into a bus. So, but in any case, it's
well, that's a classic.
It's very
these tropes.
Actually, we talked about it for a while. I did something on Twitter. My youngest daughter was like, Dad, it's well-known fact that cats turn into buses. And there are like 4 or 5 Japanese anime cartoons where cats do turn into cars and buses. So apparently that is a thing in Japan right now. But it's very, it's very JRPG. It's very Japanese RPG style. The combat system is very classic Japanese RPG. But it's a very unique game. It got crazy good reviews, and my daughter absolutely loved every minute of it. Not something I would normally play, but I could see why she liked it. It was very different, but very cool. So if you are someone who likes Japanese RPGs, or maybe you have a daughter who might be interested in them, I don't know, Luke, if anybody on your show has gotten into Persona 5, but she was really impressed by it. And it was I have to say, it was very unique. I'd never seen anything quite like it before.
Yeah, it's probably one of my biggest failings this year in terms of games I should have played, because when we come up to the Game of the Year discussions, this is one that I really need to put some time into before we start talking about it. We actually got a couple of review copies sent to us, which went to the ladies on our team, and they raved about this game. And it is the sequel to one of the greatest games of the last generation of PlayStation. So Persona 4, again, got very similarly high reviews. But yeah, cat bus is totally a thing. We've got them in Perth, Central Area Transit. That's what it is.
Sure, right. Yeah, everybody's got a cat bus. I mean, if you don't have a cat bus, your city's just not with it. That's pretty much
That's right.
What else is on your console/PC right now, Luke?
All right, well, you mentioned Uncharted, so I'll dip into that for a moment.
Yeah, sure.
So Uncharted The Lost Legacy actually came out a couple of months ago.
It did.
And this was originally going to be a sort of DLC expansion for Uncharted 4, but it kind of, during development, morphed and evolved into its own thing. And I'm glad that it did, because it's really, really good.
Yeah.
So, Russ, if you were considering buying a PS4 for Uncharted, I would also put The Lost Legacy on the same pedestal as being a potential console seller, because you should own a PS4 just to play these games.
I would say, I got it. I bought the first. They have a package for the first. Was it 3 Uncharted's, or was it the first 2? I can't remember what it was, but I got the first 2. Then I got 3, or
the Nathan Drake
one
collection.
was. Yeah, so I've played every Nathan Drake one. Loved it. Loved the characters. Loved the storytelling. Loved the technique. It's very similar in style to how Tomb Raider works and some other AAA titles, but it's just so polished. I don't think much else matches it in terms of polished storytelling, music. The music, it just hits everything perfectly. And the latest one, Lost Legacy, I also bought the day it came out and played it through over the weekend. These are short games. They're about 10 hours a pop. So, but you don't mind, because again, you're getting a really, really good. For me, it's a movie quality experience, like a AAA movie cinema experience. But instead of 2 hours for $20, it's 10 hours for $60. So for me, that's still a pretty good deal. And I just loved it. I thought it was just as good. I didn't mind Nathan Drake being gone. I thought the 2 ladies were fantastic. They played well off each other. They were very compelling. I liked that the Jeep was back. Actually, I liked driving in the Jeep. I thought the little they weren't really open world segments, but a little more flexibility there was cool. But
yeah, the Western Ghats was kind of a good sort of zone it sort of broke away from the on rails sort of stuff that you used to with a lot of the other games. Yeah,
because it's very much on rails normally, right? It's very much your moving from tactical situation to tactical situation with the occasional puzzle. Very Tomb Raider-y, right? But sure. I really liked it. I really, really liked it. I thought the latest one was completely true to the series, and I really hope it does well so they keep going with the new protagonists, because it's a great game. It's just a great genre.
I agree. If there is a future to the Uncharted franchise, which I very much hope there is, because it is sensational, sort of past the days of Nathan Drake, because they have essentially retired him as a character. He sort of had his...
He had a great run, though.
Yeah.
You can't really complain, yeah.
But if Uncharted continues with Chloe Frazier and Nadine Ross as the 2 central characters, ignoring the fact that they're voiced by a couple of the finest, voice acting talents in the form of Claudia Black and Laura Bailey, because I love both those women to death in terms of their work. They're fantastic. It is just, they can definitely hold their own. as the central cast members, and the game still tells compelling, exciting stories. It puts you in the front seat of an action movie, basically. That's what it does.
It does.
So,
what is Claudia Black bet? Which she's known for what as an actor?
Lots of stuff. She's been in Stargate SG-1, Farscape. Yeah. You probably recognize her instantly. And Laura Bailey, of course, is one of the cast of voice actors recently well known for being in Critical Role with Matt Mercer. So. She plays Vexalia, the half elf in that series. So yeah, a bit of D&D tie in there.
Well, I think they always choose really good actors for those games, and it's just spot on. It's great, and the writing's great, the lines are great. Every subtle snide comment is well thought through. There's a twist with a returning character later in the game. I don't want to spoil it, but it's awesome. It's just a really solid story. And it's the kind of game that and Zero Dawn, I find myself pausing and just taking screenshots over and over again. Because there's these moments where you're just looking at the game going, oh my God, I got to take a picture. It's just that the environments and the moments are very that compelling.
Yeah. Horizon Zero Dawn. My God, that was a title this year. Should we touch on that briefly?
Yeah, why not? Oh my God. This goes in both one of my favorite games of the year bucket, as well as anticipated, because I can't wait for the DLC, which comes out like in a few weeks, right? Next month. So yeah. What did you think of Zero Dawn, Luke? What drew you into it?
One of my favorite games ever. It's so good. I mean, it's a game that sort of puts you into a sort of a post-apocalyptic setting, out in the wilderness where sort of machines have kind of they've not only sort of decayed and sort of fallen into the backdrop of the setting, but they're also kind of the main antagonists too. They're part of the natural order of things. They're part of the wildlife. Like, when you're running around and hunting creatures out in the wild, you're not sort of just hunting, living, breathing animals. You're actually fighting these machines that are basically taking the place of that natural fauna. So, but the game story was incredible. The setting was incredible. The history of that world, when you actually start to uncover it and peel it back, is incredible. The main character was an absolute winner.
Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant.
Aloy, as a character, is going to be one that I'm very curious to see where she sort of moves in the future. I think she could quite easily become a Lara Croft level sort of fan favorite over time if she gets her time in the sun again. But yeah, the gameplay and the sort of hunting aspect of sort of running around and fighting in this game were just so on point that every single encounter that you have is a new and unique experience and a hell of a lot of repeatable fun. So yeah, I just could not say anything better about this game. It's incredible. Again, it's a system seller. If you don't own a PS4, you might want to get it for this one.
Yeah, No, I agree with you 100%. Zero Dawn, it's my kind of genre, so it's in that sort of open world, Assassin's Creed-y, sort of you can be stealth or combat sort of thing. It had and I always compare these games to Assassin's Creed, which is probably not fair, but the two things you have to have for me to be an Assassin's Creed feeling is, one, a good stealth mechanic, and with assassination, so both Shadow of War and Zero Dawn have that. But two, the requirement you have to climb something really tall to reveal the land around you. The twist that Zero Dawn had was you climb something really tall that happens to be walking, which was that was pretty which I thought was brilliant. But Zero Dawn was really, really good, and it's one of the few games where I generally, even though I like these sort of open world games, I generally don't try to collect all the hard to find stuff. But Zero Dawn had a couple of them that I couldn't resist. One was the desire to know more about the backstory of not only your character but the world was so compelling that I found myself going to the little collectibles because it gives you more backstory. And that's one of the things I think Shadow of War does really well too, is some of the collectibles, when you find a plate of Gondor or a helmet of Gondor in a collectible, it doesn't just go ding, you found the collectible like it does in Uncharted and shows a picture. It actually's got full voice acting of the person explaining the history. So you're compelled to listen. And Zero Dawn did something similar where it would show, you're in a post-apocalyptic world, you climb this building to find this viewpoint, and it would show sort of this holographic overlay of what it used to look like. Like there's the old football stadium from 2011, and you're hearing the backstory, and you're like, whoa, what happened? And so you're just really compelled to be drawn into it, and I think that was a brilliant piece of it. So it really, games that get me to do the collecting because it feels like part of the story. I'm kind of a story first guy. If you can make that connection and make me want to hunt down those little hard to get pieces of things and spend 10 minutes trying to figure out how to climb that hill to find it, I think you got something magical there. And so Zero Dawn definitely pulled that off.
I went to the effort of getting the Platinum Trophy for Zero Dawn. I collected everything. I couldn't help myself. It was effortless.
I didn't quite go there, but I did get her special armor, which was a little bit of work. Yes. But that armor was so cool, I had to do it. So Zero Dawn was awesome. I want before we run out of time on this, Luke, because we could talk about video games all day. I do want a couple. We've been talking AAA titles almost entirely, and there's a couple of smaller titles, almost indie titles that I thought were fantastic that recently came out. One was, have you guys played The Long Dark?
No, I have not. I saw this on your list, and I'm very curious.
So The Long Dark, there was a beta of it for over the summer, and my girls played with it, and now the full version's out, and they are hooked. So this is the game. It's kind of a genre that's becoming a thing, which is the survival genre. It's been around a little while now, right? A couple of years. But basically this idea that you're starting in The Long Dark, you essentially start in freezing cold with nothing. And your first order of business is surviving. And so most of the feedback you're getting is, you're freezing or you're starving or you've cut yourself and now you've got an infection you've got to deal with. And so you got to figure this out. But was a really and so the beta, the early access version that we happen to have on Xbox, just started in that mode. And you're trying to survive as long as you could, and maybe you'd find a cabin, and you start figuring things out, and there's a bear out there, and you got to avoid him, or maybe you want to kill him for food, you got to figure that out. But the full version, what was really impressive to me was the story. So all of a sudden it goes from random guy stuck in the cold to you're stuck in the cold, and there's a quick backstory of you were just flying in your plane and the plane crashed. And there was a second person in the plane, and this isn't really a spoiler because I don't want to. That's the early part of the game, but all of a sudden there's a story. So you're surviving. Now there's other game modes, just survival else, but all of a sudden there's a nice, compelling story as to why you want to survive, which is really interesting to me. I like the art style is very unique, which I also really liked. This is a really good game and a very different sort of game. It's the survival genre, but if you're not used to the survival genre, or if you're a fan of the genre, definitely check out The Long Dark because it's a really neat looking game, and I'm really impressed with the voice acting and the story, in addition to this essentially being an indie developer who's come up with a really strong survival game.
Is this a PC game or is it on a console?
I'm playing it on the Xbox, but it's also on Steam, and I'm almost certain it's on PS4, though I haven't validated that.
Cool.
But I bet it is.
I'll look that up.
The other little game I wanted to mention is Oxenfree. Have you heard about this one?
Yes, so we actually run a segment on the show called Party Game of the Month, where we actually get listeners to submit suggestions for a game that we sort of play and review each month. And we add it to a random list and kind of pick it, at random. Oxenfree has been sitting on our list for a while, and I've been looking at it every month with longing as we roll up the next game. And it's not appeared yet, but I cannot wait until it does because I think it looks fantastic. So,
yeah. So my daughter's what's the other one? Going Home. Going Home. Yeah. So the Oxenfree and Going Home came out at the same time. One was a super good deal on Xbox Gold. I can't remember which one was. So they grabbed one was free and one was like $10 or something. So they got them. Going Home, they thought they were going to like, and they got like a little ways into it and they got bored. So they switched over to Oxenfree. And the funny thing about Oxenfree is, so the premise on Oxenfree is a bunch of high school kids going on a boat out to an island because that's where they're going to go have drinks because high school kids, right? And then all of a sudden, there's this whole mystery thing that starts happening out there. What's interesting about it is it's not an action game. It's not even really a point-and-click adventure game. It's really just a dialogue selection game. So people are talking to each other. You're picking responses. The responses to the dialogue, though, not only choose what the people are doing, but it also informs the backstory. So one might say, oh, you want to have a smoke? And you can say, I don't smoke. Or you can say, you do smoke. And that'll inform things that you have later, like matches. So there's little things like that. But it's just, and people I've seen some text reviews and the discussion forums about how it's not really, you're not doing anything. It's just clicking. I guess it's kind of like a make your own adventure book in a way, but really compelling story, really interesting. I love the art style, and the mystery's really great. My girls blasted through it in a weekend when I was out of town, and they keep begging me to play it so they can talk to me about it. So, but I've watched the first 10 minutes of it, and I was already hooked, and I had to leave. But I was like, wow, this looks really, really good. So And again, it's cheap. I want to say on the Xbox Gold deal, it's like $10, maybe 19. And I'm sure you can get a good deal on it on Steam as well. So definitely check out Oxenfree. It's a neat looking game.
Mm-hmm. Haven't even played it, and I could recommend it based on desire alone.
There you go.
Sure.
So you, Luke, you have any sort of like indie titles or anything we should be looking at?
Yeah, well, I spoke a little bit about Cuphead in the opening segment of the show, so people have probably heard a bit about that already. What else? I think maybe I'll just switch into stuff that I'm highly anticipating just to wrap out the year, things that have not arrived yet. So Wolfenstein: The New Colossus is probably the biggest game on my radar, which I'll be looking forward to playing as soon as I get back from PAX. And it just blows my mind that we're in 2017, and one of the things that I'm most excited about is a Wolfenstein title. What are we even living in?
That's awesome, though. But I wish, is it coming out on consoles too? Or is it only PC?
Now, funny you should ask that. I believe it is coming out on all consoles, but it is actually coming out on the Nintendo Switch as well. And this is the sort of game.
Why are you getting it on the PC, Mr. Nintendo fan? What's going on there?
Well, I'm only getting it on the PC because I have some free hard drive space and my consoles are currently full and I need to clear stuff off. So
that is the worst excuse I've ever heard.
I know. It's a terrible excuse. But also, mostly because one of the considerations for me is when it comes to video cutting and editing, it's a little bit easier on PC. It's not hugely easier, but it just,
That's fair.
Anyway. Because reasons.
Mine's embarrassing. I don't. This is really embarrassing. I don't have a good gaming rig. So for PC gaming, I am, Divinity Original Sin runs fine because I have an average gaming rig. I have an i7 with decent power, but I don't have the best video card. So 3D shooters like Wolfenstein aren't going to look good unless I really can all that stuff. So I'd rather play on the console where I don't feel like. The problem with PC hardcore gaming is unless I have a really good gaming rig, I always feel like I'm not getting the experience I should have. When I play on a console, I know I'm getting the best experience I can have because I'm not missing any hardware, so I always tend towards those for that situation.
That's fair. It is coming out on PS4 though, so you can definitely pick it up for that.
There you go. See, I can get it that way. I'll get it on 4K. See, Luke, and I can pretend that's cool.
Killing Nazis in 4K. That sounds like my kind of fun.
That's right, my kind of fun. Yeah,
absolutely. Awesome. If you don't know anything about the game, I highly recommend that you go and check out the trailer that's online from the E3 presentation that they did earlier this year. It is one of the most psychedelic acid trip of presentations you've ever seen. It's hilarious.
That's awesome.
But the long and short of it is high-tech Nazis invading America. Action hero BJ Blazkowicz needs to basically put them to task and wipe them out. So if you know Wolfenstein, you know what it's all about. It's a great
what it's all
time.
about. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And the last one, which I'm actually going to be picking up a Nintendo Switch for, because I've not actually purchased the Switch just yet. I've been holding off for this game, is the new Super Mario game. So Super Mario Odyssey is coming out in the next couple of weeks. So this time Mario has a hat that is possessed by a ghost, and he can actually use that to throw out and possess other creatures in the game. So you can literally run up to a Goomba, throw your cap at it, and then become the Goomba to sort of navigate the world and sort of get through various different puzzles.
And who hasn't dreamed of being a Goomba, Luke? Let's be honest.
You can be a T-Rex in this game, Russ. You can turn into a T-Rex. It's a Mario game.
All right, I'm in. Well, so that sounds awesome. The only game I am that does seem. Mario sells consoles, so that will definitely help us switch out. I am excited for. I think, through this segment, everybody's heard me say Assassin's Creed at least 4 times. So obviously I'm excited for Origins, as are my children, because we all love Assassin's Creed. So we're really looking forward to picking up Origins the end of this month. So that's the big one we can't wait for.
Sure. Yeah, it looks good. I'll try and squeeze it into my busy schedule.
I know, right? What a season, man. Luke, there's so much going on. How are we going to find disk space, never mind time for all this stuff, to your point?
Oh, disk space I'm just going to have to be very harsh on. Just cut. You don't make the cut.
Right. Well, the thing is, it's cheap now. You can just buy a terabyte drive for your favorite console or your PC, and boom, for $100 or not even. So, well, Luke, I think this is fantastic. Thanks for joining us on video games. We're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, we'll be doing a game review. Craig, do you know what that game is, Craig? Wake up.
That game is Pac-Man.
No.
Good try.
Good try, though.
Shadespire.
That's the one. So we'll hear from Total Fangirl. We'll be back with Shadespire right after this.
This is Total Fangirl. Regular Jane most days, total fangirl when the moment strikes. Han shot first. Starbuck is a guy. And Lestat, now there's a vampire. Hey everyone, this is Nicole, your Total Fangirl. You can follow me on Twitter and check out my blog, TotalFangirl.com. Our shout out is to all of our wonderful supporters over at Patreon. Head to patreon.com/the D6 Generation and you too can support the show. So I attended an event recently where I was off-road in the dirt. It was a rally. It was just for women, and it went through Nevada and California, and it was this off-road navigation rally. It was pretty amazing. So I'm in there in the desert with people who are drivers, and some of them who aren't really experienced drivers, but there are certain kind of people, they're the off-roaders or the hardcore. This is an amazing group of women, but there's not a lot of nerds, at least as far as I know, until I randomly sit down at a table and someone lets loose with a Star Trek quote. So then we spent the rest of our dinner talking about Star Trek. We were talking about Orville. We were talking about Discovery. We had a really fun conversation. So now we have bonded. In fact, she gave me a hat from her team, Fast and Curious, because not only were we out there in the desert, in the middle of nowhere, trying to make it through all this, and I'm just covering just press. These women are driving and navigating this course all day, just pairs of them, a driver and a navigator. And now we have this little moment of something that we can all hold on to from the outside world. We both love Star Trek. So it was really cool, and it was kind of fun to bump into a random nerd at an automotive event. But then something even cooler happened, and I felt like such a dork, okay? Because I was with people who had no idea what was happening. So for part of this course, they're off-road, and kind of what you do is you're chasing them, but you're trying to beat them a lot of the time if you're taking pictures. So they have a very specific route they have to take that's off-road, and they have to have these navigation checkpoints. But there are roads. California and Nevada have roads. And you will take sometimes straightaway roads so that you can get in front of the teams and you can be there to see them as they try and find checkpoints and see them as they come over particularly scenic spots so you can take photos. So we're on this main road heading to dunes, these gigantic dunes in California that we're going to be camping at for the night. And as we're heading to these dunes, we have to get permits for all these vehicles. That there was a certain kind of permit that they couldn't buy unless you showed up at the permit place. And it was between the hours of 1 and 3, only when the moon was full and the sky was clear. It was so hard to get these goofy permits, and she couldn't do them online. So we're driving along these highways, we're cruising right along, and we stop at one of the places for a permit. And across the street is this Area 51 rest area. And we're in the Nevada area, about to cross into California. I don't quite know where I am. I'm trusting the person who runs the entire rally, who is driving this vehicle for me, knows where she's going. And I'm like, oh my God, it's an Area 51 rest area. That is the coolest thing ever. And they're like, what? They have no idea. I'm like, you don't know about the aliens and Area 51. And as I'm talking in my excitement and trying to explain this, I can see their eyes glazing over, the woman who was driving and the official race photographer looking at me like I might as well be speaking Klingon. They have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm like, hold up, you guys do the permit thing across the street with the permit people. I am going into this Area 51 thing. And I walk in and it's all Area 51 themed. There's t-shirts, little aliens on them, and mugs with little aliens on them. And there's chocolate shaped little aliens. There's all this alien stuff. So I end up getting this magnet because there's only so much I can fit in my teeny luggage that looks like, when you see the sign that says kids crossing, it'll have a little boy and a little girl, and they're running across the road at a school zone. And there's a lunchbox in his hand, don't hit Timmy and Tina as they run across the road. It was that, but it had aliens on it. They were little alien people. So I have a little magnet as my commemoration of being there. But my favorite part of the whole thing, I still don't know exactly where I am. It's not I'm seeing Area 51. I'm am I that close? Is it right there? And I'm somehow missing this? Is it that hidden with the aliens? So I say to the guy at the counter, who is in fact wearing one of the alien-themed t-shirts, which his lovely establishment sells, I said, are we really that close to Area 51? I don't even know where I am. And he looks at me and says, it's about 16 miles that way. And he points towards the back of the store. I'm like, no kidding. I said, so it's still a little ways away. And he's like, He goes, this is about as close as y'all can get without getting shot. Which I thought was the most wonderful reaction. So I guess I was as close to Area 51 as you can get without getting shot. And dang it, I didn't see a single alien.
Oh yes, lightning bolts fill the room. Hello, my friends. I bet you didn't expect that voice, did you? No, you didn't. You didn't expect me, Owen, from Words from Wales. Well, here I am with Words from Wales. That's what it's all about. I tell you something, it's been an aeon, it's been an age, it's been a dog's age, it's been an eternity since I last spoke to you across the wavelengths. In fact, I cannot remember the last time I sat up in the middle of the night talking to Russ and Craig, falling asleep between their questions, only to awaken to give a witty answer here and there. But in that time I have seen Russ twice, had 2 free meals out of him as well. What did you have, I hear you ask? I will tell you, the most expensive thing on the menu, twice. But I've enjoyed, and here I am, with you. It's been a while and many things have changed. Games have fallen away, games have grown, board games have come and gone, computer games have been completed and filed away, and here I am, still talking about Words from Wales. I thought that I would bring myself to bring to you a little review that I have of a new game from Games Workshop, Shadespire. Now, as you know, since the great Warhammer schism of 2015, things have changed totally. People have been cast asunder, tribes wander, roaming the lands, looking for something to play. I have been there playing Age of Sigmar, playing Kings of War, and board games beyond count. But now I find myself drawn by Shadespire from Games Workshop, a new boxed game of arena tactical combat. I thought, shall I write a review? So taken was I by this game. And I thought then, of course I will. So I wrote the review, and I give it to you now. Through the medium of verse, of course, through the medium of poetry. Again, wrad, dyma fi, and here I am, speaking in verse. My review, Shadespire from Games Workshop. Excuse me, my friends. New from Games Workshop, and fits in a box. Aboard cards and figures, as cosy as socks. Shadespire's a card game, with a figures and a board. If it was a treasure, it would be a hoard. Choose, build your warband, be it Chaos or Stormcast. It's easy to do, and playing is so fast. You get cards, you get powers, you get ploys and all stuff. And when warbands do clash, it can get a bit rough. In only 30 minutes, you can play a game. With all the options, no 2 will be the same. The dice are quite pretty, the symbols are clear. It's easy to tell when you're kicked in the rear. If they support it with products, this game will have legs, like a nice 2-person tent that's been nailed down with pegs. I hope that you like it. I think it's great. A lovely quick game you can play with your mate. Get yourself a copy. I hope you enjoy. And like a lost at sea sailor, you will cry, "Land ahoy!" Ha ha! There you go. I loved it. What an excellent game. And I hope you enjoy it too. Give it a chance, my friends. Beautiful figures, beautiful cards, beautiful game. So there we are. Words at Wales. Back briefly, but back. And here in front of me I have Middle-earth, Shadow of War on the PS4. Maybe I'll try that for a little while. I've given it a little game. It's enticed me in. Maybe that will be my next review. As I said, my name is Owen Staten. You may find me on Twitter at Owen Staten, Staton. You should know me on the D6 generation. I'm the only one who can actually say the name Craig. Yes! Be in touch if you want, owenstaten@aol.com, or follow me on @OwenStaten. But until the next time, whenever that may be, enjoy, my friends. Hwyl fawr I bawb.
You're listening to the Dice Tower Network at Dicetowernetwork.com. More fun than Merchant of Venus. Wait, what?
Who writes these?
Hey, welcome back, and now it's time to talk about, we've been teasing this for a while. Games Workshop was nice enough to send us a review copy of this, and as we tell all the folks that send us review games, hey, if we play your game, well, first of all, if we get your game and it looks cool, we'll play it. And if we play your game
do our best
and like it, we might even review it on the show. And obviously, we like this enough to talk about it, and that is Warhammer Underworlds Shadespire.
That's a lot of words.
Double check that one.
I have triple checked it, and I will say
Shadow appear anywhere in that? I don't know.
No, it's a terrible name. Unfortunately.
On the other hand, you know what appears more in that word in that name than Shadow?
What's that?
Underwear.
Yes. Yes.
Underwear is closer than Shadow.
Underwear is in there.
If you've got a shadow in your underwear, deal with it, please.
Even worse. Yes. Please pause the recording. Go deal with that.
Wrap that
and seriously, nothing happening here should preclude you from taking care of a shadow in your underwear.
So if you're still listening, let's talk about this game. So Craig and I have played it now several times. Craig's played it a lot. I've played it 3 times. Luke has not played it yet, but Luke, are you familiar with Warhammer Underworlds Shadespire?
I am familiar enough to play the role of the piqued interest voyeur on this occasion. So
I defy anybody now to say Warhammer Underworlds Shadespire and not think about underwear or Shadow.
We have ruined the game title. Right. Try to say it 6 times fast.
This is the last game Games Workshop will ever say.
No, not with 3 names. But let me ask you this, Luke. So were you aware this game is coming out? Have you heard about it?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, obviously not doing World's End Radio as frequently these days.
Sure.
I.e. not. The Warhammer universe is something I've still got an active interest in, despite the fact that I'm not talking about it sort of on a regular basis. But yeah, as far as the Age of Sigmar sort of era Warhammer goes, I've not done a lot of playing because I am one of the people who, unfortunately, is a little bitter about the change from the Warhammer of old. But look, I have heard great things, so I'm super interested still. Right. We will see.
Well, we'll see. So this is interesting because we're going to have Luke give us a dramatic reading here in a moment of the Games Workshop sort of pitch for this game, and it's an interesting pitch and I want to talk about this for a second because this is really, I think this is fascinating. And
it is very fascinating.
And I think you want to keep this pitch in mind as we talk about the rules of this game, and at the end when we surmise it, because there's really
this game is coming from a very specific place.
They're really targeting this thing. So it's a 2 to 4 player game, primarily a 2-player game, but there are 4-player rules right there in the back of the book. It is obviously Games Workshop published this year, 2017. Play length is stated to be about 45 minutes or so, and I think that's right. It really comes in once you know you're doing, Craig. We found it to be about 30 minutes, right?
Yeah,
pretty quick.
Yeah. 30 minutes was a long game.
Yeah, it's pretty quick, which I like. I do like that a lot. Also, for a Games Workshop game, I think it's pretty affordable. We'll talk about what comes in the box in a minute, but it's a $60 essentially board game with cool miniatures, right? So don't think of this as a miniature game from Games Workshop. Think of this as a board game with cool miniatures in it, a la, Cool Mini or Not and all that stuff, right? It's that.
It would be safe to say that it's an expandable board game, though.
Yes. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. Exactly right. So, so Luke, would you mind terribly to give us a dramatic reading of sort of the official Games Workshop statement about Warhammer Underworlds Shadespire?
Oh, my brain's going all fired off.
All right, so this is word for word straight from the box. So WUS is a tactical arena combat game. This is a system designed for balanced, small-scale tactical games that can be played quickly and easily by anyone, but which even experienced players will find challenging to master. The game rules are designed with competitive play in mind. Matches can be played in under 45 minutes on a smaller surface than our larger-scale games, and will be ideal for club or tournament play. And not only that, we'll be fully supporting an organised play system for this game right from day one. The forces you can use in this game will be drawn from races across the mortal realms, including some for factions that have not received any new miniatures since we first ventured into the Age of Sigmar. Each of these sets will be composed of a small band of easy-to-assemble, push-fit miniatures in the style of our single-pose heroes to represent a specific band of warriors from that faction. These are provided in coloured plastic and clipped together so that you can quite literally be playing with them within minutes of opening the box with no glue or paint needed, though they do look great painted and your dice will probably roll better. The game is played using unique dice and card decks, and these will, to an extent, be unique to each faction. Both decks of cards used in the game are fully customizable, meaning you can choose to create all manner of combinations of overlapping abilities to use and objectives to achieve. This can be a really rewarding part of the game and means that even the same faction can be played in wildly different ways. We're expecting to see all sorts of combinations tried out at game stores, clubs, and in tournaments.
So the couple things that jump out at me in this, Luke, and I'd love to hear your feeling on this, is this may be the first time I've ever seen Games Workshop say in a game announcement that it's actually designed for competitive play.
It is very much a position that they have steered hard away from in recent years, isn't it?
Yes. There's two things in this that are really clear. One, we are designing a tournament competitive play game, and two, we are designing a game that plays quickly, right? Mm-hmm. This is the antithesis of every other game they've pretty much ever made, right? With the exception of some little flip books and things like that, but they're miniature games, not this. And so I feel like, and this will be interesting to talk about this, but Games Workshop is trying to fill the niche of, look, Age of Sigmar, the new 40K, super fun games, but as we've always stated, those are really designed to be a storytelling experience and not a highly competitive experience. But this is competition in a box for you gamers, right? That's kind of what I feel like I'm reading.
Yeah, this is going to be a cross between Privateer Press and Magic the Gathering. Miniatures and cards. It's miniatures and cards. You've got to build your deck, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Magic.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be a very clean-cut, simple rule system. Privateer Press, War Machine Hordes, obviously a much more complex rule system because it's an actual miniatures game. This is a sort of this wants to ride that balance point, I think, and draw people in from either side. That's what I think.
The impression I got reading this passage, and I'm going to use a video games comparison here, so bear with me. The wording of it reminded me a lot of these companies these days that publish a game and then immediately say, this game is designed to be an esport. And ultimately, it's always the player base that determines whether that's viable or not. So they can pitch a game that way however they like. But, I mean, as we know from, history with games that have done traditionally very, very well, on the tabletop in a competitive sense, X-Wing's a great example. X-Wing, I don't believe, was ever made with, tournament play being the core intention. It just ended up being very, very good for that based on the simplicity of the rules and the community that got behind it. So if they can capture the imagination of the community and if the rule set is tight enough to warrant people actually pushing it in that direction, I have no doubt that it will get there, but I don't think pitching it as a tournament game out of the box is necessarily going to make that true straight out of the gate. So we'll see.
We'll see, but I got the feeling this is more a direct push towards Fantasy Flight Games, actually, because X-Wing is such a competitive sport, a board gaming thing, and it did so well for them. I think they want to get in there. But I think in general it's really that Games Workshop is kind of getting the last thing. I think they fixed the fun, right? So they pivoted. People are saying how much fun they're having with Age of Sigmar, how much fun they're having with 40K. They've got that, but they're not satisfying that competitive gamer market, which is clearly there, who keeps trying to make their games fit into the competitive game mold because they want to do it, but it's requiring tons of extra rules and all the other stuff. And here they're saying, well, no, if you want to play competitive Games Workshop stuff, here's what you use. Maybe. This is an experiment there, right?
Right. I was going to say, and to be fair, I am probably the exact target audience for this because they seem to be aiming at people who focus more on the gameplay side of things that maybe aren't as invested in the Age of Sigmar sort of background, which I'm most certainly not. And people who are maybe a bit more time poor might find this appeals to them a great deal more. So I'm definitely interested. We will see. And
there's a lot less models to paint because and we'll talk about this in a moment, but each of these war bands here are super small, so it's a fully functional war band, and you cannot add models to your war band. You can change war bands, but the model count for that particular war band is always what it is. So the Stormcast Eternals, 3 guys, 3 models to paint, and you're done. So that's it. And the Khorne Bloodhounds are 5 guys. That's it. You paint those font guys, you're done.
Bloodbound.
Bloodbound, sorry.
Bloodbound. Not to be confused with Bloodhound, which is even closer to Bloodbound than Underwear is to Underworld or Shadespire is to Shadowspire.
We are destroying this. So let's go to what's in the box, Craig. So, Craig, what is in this box? You've been spending a lot of time, poking around in there. What's in the box?
Yeah, well, the box is it's a very cool looking box. The artwork is this Stormcast Eternal guy with a kind of a youthful face, really, for a guy whose name includes the word Eternal. And then there's a sort of a combat underneath him. They're also, the interesting thing is they're kind of pitching this also as gladiatorial combat, sort of like like a Colosseum kind of thing, which I'm not really seeing. But I mean, the game is chock full. You've got the 2 war bands, so 3 models on one, 5 models in the other, and they are gorgeous models, as you would expect. Color coded, so red guys, the Bloodbound or the Blood Reavers are red, and the Stormcast Eternals, also known as the Liberators, this particular band of them, are in blue. You've got a bunch of cool dice, right? You've got each guy has his own card that'll give you all of his stats and his wounds and how fast he goes and how many dice he throws with different attacks. And each of those cards is double-sided because as your guy achieves some in-game status, something will happen, and it says right on that card. You start on the gray side of the card. Something will happen that will upgrade that guy. You flip the card, and now he's in his inspired phase, which is a gold-colored card, which gives him some extra abilities or gives him a stat boost of some kind. You've got 2 double-sided boards, so it's really cool hex boards, and they can go together in a whole bunch of different configurations. Beautiful artwork on them, as you would expect. They are not linen, and they are not shiny, so they're not like at the high end of board games, but they're very, very good quality. They're very solid, and they have some icons on them which show where to deploy guys, and they also show some impassable and line of sight blocking terrain is shaded out. But it's a cool, if you look, there's all kinds of cool details like broken mirrors all over the place and little machines that have broken open and shown you stuff. So you've got 2 of these boards, which we'll get to in a bit later, why you would have 2 of them in this 2-player starter set. You also have 96 cards because, as we said earlier, you're going to come each time you come to play this game, you're going to have 2 decks that you have built ahead of time. And the starter box that we're talking about comes with a pre-generated deck for each team, plus an extra deck that has extra cards for both teams in it and generic cards. So you can start by just using the pre-generated decks that it gives you, and then it gives you a bunch of cards to start sort of tailoring your own deck, which I think was where a lot of this game's strength is going to come in. And then it's got 8 dice. It's got 5 attack dice and 3 defense dice, which are cool. And the rule book, which has all kinds of fluff in it. Yeah. All kinds of cool little flavored text and things like that. So you get a lot in this box for $60. I think it's easily probably one of the best bargains that you'll get from that you've gotten from Games Workshop in recent times, considering how much their models generally go for.
Just to clarify, though, the plastic content is just the models themselves. There's no plastic markers or scenery pieces or anything, is there?
Correct.
Nope,
no, there's
the
not. Nope, just the guys.
Yep. The rulebook also, I will say, is very, very nice. It's one of the more organized GW rulebooks, and it's clearly designed for referenceability of mind, which goes back to the competitive play. There's a fantastic glossary in the back, which not only includes an easy way to reference all the key words and a quick definition of those words, but also has page numbers right there as well. So if you look up a particular effect like a reaction card, it tells you not only what that is, but also the page numbers. You can quickly find the details on that rule. Also, very clear sort of turn sequence reference as well. So it's real, and there's a quick reference page to get you started right away. So it does really get you going in the game really quickly, and a very easy way to reference it. So I think they did a really good job there. And as Craig mentioned, the rulebook's full color. It's like 30 so pages, and there is a lot of fluff, which which I skip past, but I'm sure Craig read every little nook and cranny of it, so he can.
No, not yet. Not yet.
How many pages would you say the actual rules component takes up?
It's like 11.
Yeah,
it's like short. 11 or 12. Yeah,
pretty short. It's a lot of pages dedicated to optional things like how to build your decks, or how to play with more than 2 players, or the tournament rules. The competitive rules are right in the book. So they really they're not joking when they say this is designed for matched play, as they call it. So yeah, it's a really solid offering. I think it looks great, and I think the box feels like a good value. Luke, how does that sound in terms of content for $60?
It depends on whether you're comparing it to GW of current or GW of old, because GW of old, of course, you'd probably expect a bit more in the box. But I mean, these days it is about on par from what it sounds like. And I think setting it as a lower price entry, if this is what they're trying to achieve, is probably the right move. So, seems good. Seems good.
So let's get to gameplay. So setting up the game is pretty simple. And what I also like about this is they have, next to their quick reference page on the actual turn sequence, they actually have the setup list right there as well. And it's really just 4 steps. You place the boards. So this is interesting. So as Craig mentioned, there are 2 different boards, and these boards are covered with hexagons, and the hexagon's going to be used to move your guys around. But what's interesting is each board is double-sided with different pre-printed terrain on it. And the players then are going to align the boards in a certain configuration for that particular battle, but you don't have to align them edge to edge. You can have them askew as long as the hexes line up. So you can have them 2 pieces they're both like long, thin rectangles. So you can have two very, very long play surface. You can have a sort of a shorter and wider play surface. You can have one that's askew, sort of like a diagonal play surface. So a lot of flexibility here, and I can imagine that in these expansions there will be more game boards. So you can imagine different kinds of areas you can fight through and really change the game style. So that's pretty. Craig, what do you think about the way the boards configure? Have you played enough to really see different effects of the boards?
I have. Yeah, I love it because you can see sort of like a dungeon forming, and it doesn't have walls or anything. Just the way the 2 boards come together when you play, you can make one long corridor, which is like a long, thin combat space, or you can combine it. The one thing you can't do is the short edge to another long edge, because the hexes don't match up. But you can go long to long or short to short, and as long as 3 hexes are lining up in each spot, then it's a valid organization. So you can create a choke point like right at the beginning of the game, and then you'll be fighting through that narrow pass, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So I think there's so much going on in this game, and as we go through it, you'll just see layer after layer added. And I think the placing the 2 boards is the very beginning of a long. Well, actually, it starts even before you come, right, when you're building your deck. Mm. But I think there's a lot of thought that can go into almost. It reminds me, not so much in the specifics, but in the general idea that there's just so much thought that can go into each element that gets added. It reminds me in that way of Rune Wars.
Yeah, I do. I think what's neat about the board setup part is that it immediately makes it feel like a different kind of game. So there's not a lot of games where the boards are. There are several, but there's not a lot to do this, and I think that was kind of a neat feeling. So again, you plop the 2 boards down. It's really simple, but it's kind of a neat already. You're like, ooh, what am I going to do with this? Next is the objective tokens. So in most core games, but there are optional rules that make this different. And most core games are going to be objective tokens. And this reminds me very much of 40K 8th edition, which I really like, actually, this part of the game, where there's these, 5 objective tokens, Craig, or 6? I can't remember, but there's some number
you put 5. There's actually, I think there's up to 9, right. But in a 2-player game, you put down 5.
Okay, so you shuffle these things up. They are one side's always the same. The other side's got these different objective numbers on them. And then players are going to alternate putting these down on the board someplace. And what this does then is they will flip over, and you'll see all these numbers, and then later you're going to have these objective cards, very similar to 40K 8th edition, where you might have a card that says, get a victory point if you can take objective 3. But right at this stage of the game, you don't have your objective cards, so you're putting the objectives down, but you don't know which one's going to be of value to you or not, or it may never be of value to you, but it could be value to your opponent. So you're just putting these things on the board that'll impact gameplay, right? Then you draw your cards, and again, for God's sakes, people, this is just a pet peeve of mine, and I'm not picking on Games Workshop here because every manufacturer does this, okay? On your quick reference sheet, is this really this hard, everyone? On your quick reference sheet, when you decide to write down this is the draw cards phase. Could you just add next to it, draw up to 5, draw up to 3, whatever the number of cards you're supposed to draw? For God's sakes, write it right there. It's like some kind of rule. None of them do it. None of them. It's always buried in some little paragraph somewhere. And in this game, it's particularly tough because there are 2 hands of cards you have. You have these cards called power cards, and you have these cards called objective cards. And what you're supposed to do in the draw cards phase is draw 5 power cards and 3 objective cards. That's pretty simple. So right there in the quick reference, why don't you write down, draw 5 power cards, comma, draw 3 objective cards. Not that hard. Doesn't take much space. And I'm not picking on Games Workshop because literally nobody does this right. I don't know why. If I ever make a board game, this will be in there. I'm telling you right now.
Right.
One thing to note is you never reshuffle your decks in this game. So if you ever use all your cards, that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Important to remember, because a lot of people just assume that rule. So a little safety tip here, you don't get to reshuffle your cards. The game plays so quick, I didn't see it happen. I don't know, Craig, have you ever seen a deck run out?
I have not.
But
I haven't seen it even close to.
But I can imagine there might be some play styles where you,
right.
where you
and we should say, I mean, we'll talk about this more later. I know it's not a time limit that's set. That's keeping these games short. It's a turn limit. You only get 3 turns.
You get 3 turns.
So there's a mathematical rule going on here that's going to limit how many cards you can kind of churn through.
Right. And the last thing you do then, so you've drawn your cards. So what's interesting about this now is the objective markers go down. Now you draw your cards. So at this point, once you've drawn your cards, a couple things are happening here. One, you're seeing you've got 3 objective cards in your hand. Now there is ways to cycle your hand, but basically you got your 3 starting objectives. You might now know which of those objectives you want to try to take because they're face up now. You know where they are. Secondly, you've got your starting powers. Your power cards. Your power cards, more about this later, but they include upgrades for your heroes, your characters, as well as certain cool moves they can do and other effects. So that might impact where you want to put your people and how you want to start off. So, and then the next step is to actually deploy your troops. And there are little icons on these boards which indicate where you can start, place a person. So there are more of these icons than there are people, so you have some good choices, but you can't just put your guys anywhere. You got to put them on the board that you put down. Remember, there's 2 boards, so each player put down 1 board. So your board is where your guys go, and then you can pick one of those starting points, right, Craig?
Yeah.
And that's setup. So it's pretty fast. You plop your boards down, you put the objective tokens out, you draw your cards from your own decks, and then you put your dudes on the map, and you're ready to start. Did I miss anything, Craig?
No, and it's designed to be fast. There's not a lot of choice. I mean, although there are a lot of choices for you to make, you're kind of narrow in all of them. So you're gonna. I mean, you could agonize forever, I guess, if you're that kind of personality. But for the most part, you only have these limited, places to put your guys. No, 2 guys can never occupy the same space. So that's where you're gonna be. Boom, you're gonna be right there, and that's gonna be it.
Is that the same for objectives? Can you have the objectives sort of stacked up in one hex, or is that a no as well?
No. In fact, they cannot be within 2 hexes of another objective.
Okay.
And it's an excellent question. When you put the 2 boards together, it creates where the partial hexes are coming together to create whole hexes. That's no man's land. You can't put a guy there, but you can put an objective there. The only thing you can't do is put an objective in one of the edge slots until the last objective goes down. That objective can be on a side, on a very edge hex. Right. Otherwise, they have to be at least 1 hex in and 2 or more hexes away from each other.
Yep. So you're looking at now. There are other objective there are other victory point scoring cards that you'll have, objective cards you have in hand that aren't related to objectives. So you may. Right. It's possible to get a hand that has no objectives in it, meaning you get objectives you try to do, but they're not related to objective tokens on the table.
And because you're constructing your objective deck, you could construct your objective deck so that it doesn't have any of those also. So you don't have to worry about that.
Right. So there's stuff that's happening prior to the game where you're the 2 things you can do prior to the game, because there's no warband configuration in this game. There's no deciding who's in your warband. There's no making an army list with war gear in it. There's no point system or any of that stuff. Instead, you've built your power card deck and you've built your objective card deck, and more about those later. So and what gear your guy has is going to evolve as the game goes on through your power cards. Right. So let's talk about how you play the game. So as Craig mentioned earlier, it is a 3-round game. And after 3 rounds, the game is over, and the player with the most victory points is the winner. Now, one thing to note, though, that's the core game mechanics. There is an optional gameplay variant where there's this little sort of capture the flag situation. But for core play and for match play, it's all based on the objective cards, which are going to give you victory points. And so basically get the most victory points you can inside 3 rounds, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And by the way, total party kill does not guarantee a win, right? You got to get points.
Not.
There actually is an objective card that says if you wipe out your opponent's warband, you get like 5 victory points, which is a lot because most victory cards are like worth 1. So there's cards that give you really high points, but if you didn't get that card or didn't take that card, you're not going to win just by killing the guy. You got to get.
Or if you get it early, then you have a very hard decision to make because that's going to lock out one of your potential cards over the course of you've got 3 turns to get your points.
Right.
That's going to be sucking that up the entire game then if you want to hold on to it. And if you don't do it in the end, then you've wasted those other opportunities to score elsewhere.
Right.
A lot of choices to make.
Just to clarify, you're saying a total party kill does not guarantee a win. It's based on points. Is there anything else that contributes to game victory, like running your opponent's card deck down or, pints of blood drunk from the skulls or I don't know, what else?
Nope. It's all based on objective. Now, I haven't seen all the objective cards, so there could be an objective card that says if your opponent's deck is empty, you get points, but it's all based on the language in the objective cards. So if you're not scoring points from objective cards, you're not scoring points. There is no, get score points from objective cards plus you get points for every guy you kill or something. So unless an objective card says it, but they have crazy things in the objective cards. Like one of them might be if all 3 of your guys, if your entire warband charges in a turn, you get a victory point. Or, if you killed a guy this turn, get a victory point. Or, but you may or not have that card, right? So there's all kinds of crazy things you can do. So you're basically building a play style. When you're building your objective deck, you're building a play style for your force, right?
And your cards are visible to only yourself, or does your opponent know what objectives?
No, your opponent. Your opponent may not look at your deck, and your opponent does not look at your hand. So the only time your opponent sees your cards is when you play them.
Cool.
So it's pretty neat. There's a lot going on here that's really interesting. A lot of innovation happening here in this game. I know we were kind of teasing its name and stuff, and we're teasing it only because we love it, because there's a lot of really cool things happening here. All right, so each round. So what happens is we're going to play 3 rounds. And the rounds are pretty simple. So one of the things you're going to do that's not explicitly said in setup, but you're also going to give each player a number of action tokens that are going to go on his side of the table. And Craig, it's 4 action tokens. Is that right?
Yes.
So each player gets
4. Yes.
Each player gets 4 of these action tokens, and they're double-sided. So one side they're like glowing, and the other side they're like not glowing. So the idea is, in each of these rounds, each of these 3 rounds, in one round, we're going to go back and forth, and each of us is going to turn one of our action tokens over and take an action. And then after I'm done, Craig goes. And we're going to go back and forth doing this. There's actually several different things we do. We're going to go through and do this with each of the actions. And then it's going to be over. We're going to do the round, right? So a round is going to consist of a bunch of stuff, but it's integrated and a bunch of things are happening. So at the start of the round, you reset your action tokens. We're going to go. So if I'm happen to be first, and whoever's first is based on a dice roll, I'm going to go ahead and pick one of my action tokens. And I'm either going to, with that single action, I'm either going to move a guy, or I'm going to attack with a guy, or I'm going to charge with a guy, or I'm going to guard with a guy. That's it. That's all there is to it. So it's not like you're going to get it's not like, miniature gamers will be thinking, well, I get an activation, right? That means I get to move, and then I get to shoot, and then I get to, no. You get to either move, or attack, or charge, which is the move attack combo. That's the only one that has that. Or guard, which is basically get better defenses, right? Mm-hmm. And that's it. And after you do your action, you make sure to remember to put your little marker token next to your guy, because depending on the action you do, so for example, if you move, you must push the little I've moved marker next to your dude, because in a future state, if you do another action when the round comes back to you, when the action comes back to me again, I can't move that guy again. So you're marking the fact that guy can't move twice in a given round, right? And if I charge, I have to put the no move or attack option on there, because once you charge, you're pretty much done. Kind of like the old when you run, you're done rule. But what's interesting is if I attack, no marker goes on that guy. So if I attack with a guy and then Craig goes and then I get to go again and spend another action point, I can attack again with the same model. So as long as I don't charge, I can attack multiple,
or charge.
Yes. But once I've if I've moved, I can't move again, but I can still attack multiple times, right? So charge locks you down from not doing anything else extra.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. So I do my thing. I'm going to choose to move or attack. Attacking is super simple. On your card, there's an icon with a number of dice next to it. The icon is the symbol on the dice you're looking for. The dice have different symbols on them, and depending on the person, the icon's different, and so that helps you out with probability. So some guys are more accurate than others. So you're going to roll the number of dice in your card specified, looking for that symbol. Every success is a success. The target of your attack gets a number of defense dice on his card. He's looking for a certain symbol for defenses. If the attacker's symbols are greater than the defender's symbols, then the attacker does as many damage points to the defender as is said on his card. So it's not like the number of successes indicates how much damage you do. It's just if you beat your opponent, you do X amount of damage as written on your card. So pretty much simple. The only nuance to this is the critical success, which means if you get a critical hit, unless the guy gets a critical defense, you get through, right?
And if it's a tie.
And if it's a tie...
Because if it's a tie, you don't do any damage, but you can push your target.
That's right. And you can always...
Ooh, that's cool.
After you attack, if you win... and do damage, you can push your target also. So you get to push your target, and then if you tie, you can still push your target, which is pretty neat.
Yep.
Can you push them onto hazardous scenery? Are there spikes and things around, or is that not a...
There aren't spikes and things, but if a model is trapped and there's nowhere to be pushed, and you on a tie, you push them, and there's nowhere they can go, they take the damage as if they were hit.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
If you hit them and try to push them, and there's nowhere for them to go, they just don't go anywhere. You don't do double damage. But if it's a tie and you push them and they're locked in, then they take the damage.
Right. So what's interesting is, and that's pretty much your actions. Although there's one other action point one other thing you can do with your action point, which is if you don't have anybody you want to activate, or you can't activate anybody, or you'd rather not activate anybody, you can instead flip over one of your action tokens and basically discard one of your cards. Right. And do you draw a new one, Craig, immediately? I think you do, right?
Yes.
So this is a way.
Well, you can just draw. You can draw a power card.
You don't discard. You just draw.
Or you discard an objective card and draw a new one.
Right. So So what's interesting is there's no hand limit, and this is how you can burn through your deck. Right.
Well, there's no hand limit for power cards.
Right.
There's always a hand limit for your objective cards.
Right. So but this is how you burn through your deck, because you could spend in a turn, you could basically not activate any of your dudes and spend all 4 of your actions just getting cards. So,
that's true.
And because the minimum deck size is only, quote unquote, 20, you could imagine a situation where you get through your cards. You draw 4 to begin with, you spend 4 next turn, that's 8. You could imagine a situation where you go through, and then during the end turn, you can actually discard your whole hand and draw new. So you could burn through your cards pretty quick. If you're really trying, we don't know if there's like super uber cards or something you're really trying to find, maybe, but you could burn through your deck pretty quick if you're not careful.
Question.
Yes.
When you have a six. So I just looking at the number of actions that are available to each of your fighters. So the Stormcast Eternals are 3 Warband members.
Yep.
And the Bloodbound are 5. Now, if they all have 4 action points each, how does that work out with regards to the back and forth? Did you end up with a glut of Khorne Bloodbound actions at the end of the turn?
No. We were not clear about that.
No,
go ahead, Craig.
Each model doesn't get 4 actions. Each player gets 4 activations.
Oh,
yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So and one other nuance we should say though is that there's this rule called supporting. So there's an icon on the die that is a miss unless there's another one of your models against the model you're attacking, right? And then there's another icon on a model that's a miss unless there's 2 other models of your time attacking. So basically, your attacks become more likely to succeed if you have more models in base contact. So this is a playstyle difference that's much easier for the blood guys to do than it is for the blue guys to do, because the blue guys are outnumbered, so they're probably going to have a harder time getting 2-to-1, 3-to-1 odds on somebody. But the red guys don't have that problem as much because there's a lot of them. And one of the things that helps out too here, Luke, is even though you have the same number of actions for both players, the red models are actually much faster than the blue models, so they can get where they want to go. But to balance things out, the blue models typically have slightly better defenses and more wounds. So it's easier to kill the red models, but it's easier to overwhelm the blue models, right? So it's a pretty neat. They seem to play pretty balanced, except it's a little more nuanced playing the red guys because it's harder to understand the right way to spend your limited resource of action points to make sure you're getting the most out of 5 guys. Where with 3 guys, it's a little easier to understand. You're double activating some dudes, right?
Right. And those 3 guys, when they get inspired, become even easier to sort of use because their main boost is they get 2 defense dice instead of 1.
Right.
Whereas the Khorne guys, their main boost when they get inspired is an additional point of movement. So they become even faster, but that doesn't help you unless you already have that plan in place for how to use them.
You do have to learn the play style of your force. That's one of the big things we've learned. So that's pretty much.
And we should say that the support works in defense also.
Yes.
If you have a friendly model in base to base with the guy who's attacking you, or two friendly models in base to base with the guy who's attacking you or adjacent, then those icons, those same icons appear on the defense dice as well and have the exact same effect.
Right. They just give you more successes. So
exactly.
That's a really simple mechanic. I really like how that works. So that's the action phase. Now, after both sides have done all their actions, right, you get the power step, which is, did the power step happen, Craig, after each action?
Yep, after each activation.
So after each activation, you get the power step, which is when you play your cards. Now, there are two kinds of cards in the game with icons on them. One is a ploy card, which is basically a card you just play right now. And by the way, you can play as many cards in the power step as you want, but starting with the current player who just activated, he plays one or she plays one, and then the opponent plays one. You go back and forth until both players pass. Now, these cards can either be a ploy card, which is basically play it immediately and it does something cool. Like, Craig, what's a good example of a ploy card?
A good example would be that in the next activation, none of your models can be forced back.
Right. So that's a ploy card. Or you can play an upgrade card. Now, the upgrade cards are interesting. These are essentially, this is how what GW would normally have done with war gear starts to show up into the game. So some of these upgrade cards always have little cogs in the corner, and they have a cost associated with them. And the cost for these guys are victory points. So when you earn victory points, more about those in a second, they come over as icons to your side of the board also, or as tokens to your side of the board. And they are also double-sided with a glowy side and not glowy side. A victory point is always a victory point. At the end of the game, you're still going to score that many victory points, how many tokens you have. But when you first get a victory point, it's glowy side up. And you can spend the victory point when you deploy a upgrade card to spend for the upgrade card. So you turn your victory point over so that you still have the token, so you're still going to score the point at the end of the game, but you've now spent it against one of these upgrade cards. And these upgrade cards do a bunch of different things. And some of them are character specific, so that you can only go on a certain model. And some of them are faction specific, and some of them are generic that any faction can take in their deck. Craig, what's an example of some of the upgrade cards?
Well, some of the generic ones are +1 wound to the model.
Yep.
+1 speed to the model. And some of the specific ones, they not only are they specific to faction, they can also be specific to model. For instance, it can be a very specific piece of war gear. One of the Stormcast Eternals have a specific sword that actually gives him a lightning attack, so he has a ranged attack now if you equip that. But those upgrade cards don't happen for free though.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So the ploy cards happen for free. The upgrade cards have to be paid for with 1 victory point, and you don't lose the victory point, but it tarnishes, so you can't use it again. So
that's right.
Basically, it's the victory points are multiple points of resource.
Yep. Making sense, Luke?
Yeah, it does. I'm almost a little disappointed you don't have to spend the victory point entirely. Because
I know it would be kind of cool dilemma. If it was. But what's interesting about the way this works, though, is essentially it sort of escalates the impact of the game. So, if you spent the victory point and kind of made it a tough decision, do you save your victory points for winning or do you spend them on upgrades? But actually what happens is the game just escalates in power. But what I find interesting about this mechanic is it allows you to customize your warband through playing the game, right? And so you're deciding, but when you're building that deck before the game starts of upgrade cards, you're really deciding, am I taking the lightning sword this time, or do I need more, more hardy guys? Do I need more wound enhancing cards, or is there something else I want to get in there? Do I want cards for a specific character? Because if that character dies early and I get that card, I won't be able to utilize it, so I'll need a different card. So there's a lot of interesting choices here, but they really preserve the game balance. Because, Craig, is it always only 1 victory point, or sometimes is it 2? I thought there was a cost on there.
I don't believe... No, there's no cost on the card, so I believe it's just one.
That's cool. And you can spend as many as you want. So if you manage to score like 2 or 3 victory points in a prior turn... then you could put 3 upgrades out right now. So you can just go back and forth and do that. So it just all of a sudden changes and upgrades the game and makes things really interesting. So I really like how this works. And I do like you have to earn victory points to be able to make it happen. It kind of reminds me a little bit of momentum, the momentum concept in Guild Ball, because as things progress, all of a sudden things are more powerful. but in a very unique way. I like it a lot. And then last but not least, so you're going back and forth. You do a round. Craig does an action. Then we both do a power step. And then I do an action. We both do a power step. We go back and forth until all of our action tokens are spent. And then the round's over. So round 1 is done. So we do 4 actions. Done. And then there's the end phase. End phase is super simple. You look at your objective cards. And if you've got any you can score, you show it to your opponent and you score. And you get your victory point tokens on the glowy side up, right? And then you can also then optionally right now discard any remaining objective cards you don't want. This is interesting, Craig. I didn't catch them when we were playing, but there's an opportunity here to play upgrade cards again right now. So if you scored victory points right now, you can then immediately take advantage of them and play some upgrades, which I thought was cool. And then also what's cool is then you can also discard any power cards you don't want anymore. And now you're going to draw back up to 3 objectives and 5 power cards. So again, really good hand management in this game. You can buy bonus cards right during the battle, but you pay action points for them. Or even if you use all your action points on your models, during the end phase, you can discard cards that aren't working out and then draw back. So, but if you're waiting for the end of the round, that's expensive because there's only 3 rounds in the whole game. So you're giving up a third of the game to cycle your hand. And that's pretty much it. And then you just repeat. You go back, you do the next round, you reset your tokens, and you go. And that's it, Luke. What do you think of the basic rules there?
That sounds deceptively simple. The cards, I get the impression, are the thing that really adds the granular content to the game. So, yeah, and the potential for expansion as well. So I'm very curious to see what that looks. I mean, you can never, in a competitive sense, I think it's very rare that you can get a true sense of where the game's going to head from just the starter box. It's always the first few things that get added to it that really give you a feel for what direction it's going to go in. But I don't know. It sounds promising so far. I'm intrigued.
It is intriguing, and I think what's interesting about it is those cards are really a huge part of the game, but they did a good job of not making it feel like the game's all about the cards and not about the models or their position either. That all matters too. But you do spend a lot of time with those power, like there's cards in there, one of the cards is, I can't remember what it's called, but basically it's you reroll to failed attack, right? That's obviously huge.
Yep.
There are cards that do bonus damage, and things like that you surprise your opponent with because your opponent's got all the math figured out. He's like, well, you guys going to, because there's a lot of not random stuff, right? Which makes the game really interesting and tactical. So, for example, the speed of my model is right on their card. So unlike other Games Workshop games where charge distance is random, this is all flat out. So you know how far the guy's going to move, right? You know the damage of his attack, regardless of how well he rolls. The attack damage is always 3 from that guy. Doesn't matter how well he rolls. If he beats me, he gets 3 points of damage on me. Which means in my head I'm going, he can't possibly kill me because my guy's got 4 wounds, so I can suck that up and not be concerned. Except when he surprises me by attacking me and then playing a card that adds 1 point of damage this turn if you successfully attack. That kind of
And there are ploy cards that are also what do they call them? Not response, but
reaction cards.
Reaction cards, yeah. Which you can play when that particular set of circumstances develops. For instance, the card that Russ just talked about where you get to re-roll your attack if it fails, that's a reaction card. That's a ploy card, so you don't have to pay for it. It just happens right there if you happen to have the card. There are also models that have reaction abilities on their inspired side. So at the beginning of the game, they don't have those abilities. Then when they get inspired, you flip it over, and all of a sudden, for instance, one of the Stormcast Eternals is getting that attack on you if you attack her and you miss, because she has a reaction that allows her to attack you back in a powerful repost ability.
So pretty cool stuff. So that adds a lot of depth to the game, and I think really what I like about the game is the rules are very simple, but the cards add a lot of tactical depth, which is really interesting. And the fact that you get to build your own deck, but there's still faction-specific stuff, really adds a lot of interesting things. So, Luke, you mentioned, these games really start to shine once you see the expansion. On the inside, once you open the box cover, on the inside of the lower half of the box, they preview some of the expansion. They look like they're going to be like blister pack size that can hang on a little pegboard peg. And in these are going to be a warband and 60 more cards. And the warbands are all pre-configured again. So they show on the side of the box the picture of the orc warband. I think it's like 4 or 5 orcs. That's it. There's just going to be a warband of like 4 orcs.
Yeah.
But there's going to be all these cards in there. Some of those cards will be orc-specific cards for both objectives and for ploy, but power cards. But also there will be generic power cards and generic objectives that other factions could take advantage of. So you might, by buying that warband, A, you not only increase your collection, but B, now you're going to have cards that you could probably mix and match with other warbands as well. So which again reminds me very much of the Fantasy Flight model of X-Wing. There's a lot of inspiration here from X-Wing, I think, in terms of how they're doing stuff, which is nothing wrong with that. X-Wing's a great model to copy.
So given that each of the characters you mentioned in the warband don't really sort of have points associated with them, do you see a expansion to this game where you can actually sort of build your own warband, or do you think they're going to be set sort of rosters?
All things point to sets, really.
Yeah, the plan seems to be sets.
Right.
And
so for people who are existing Warhammer players or existing Age of Sigmar players, the likelihood of them being able to sort of pick and choose models from their existing collection to include is pretty slim to none.
But the other direction is supported. So there's already download rules that give you Age of Sigmar rules for all the models in the starter set.
Oh, okay.
So
cool.
you can take the models that direction. And I suppose you could probably, use stand-in models from your favorite Age of Sigmar guys in as these guys, right? If you wanted to, but you'd have to play by the rules on these cards. I don't know how strict you're going to be in competitive play with stand-in models or conversions.
But I did note in the extra rules that were mentioned, there apparently is a multiplayer variant. Yeah. Did you have a look at that?
Craig's played it a little bit. What'd you think of multiplayer?
No, I didn't. I didn't play it. I didn't play it. I just noticed it. So I don't know. Oh, but I believe you still but you still need the boards. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking right now at the back. So the expansions are going to come in boxes that look very much like the old Warjack boxes from Privateer Press.
Right, exactly.
And I cannot for the life of me. The printing is very blurry. It's not a very high res picture, but it looks like you can see the orcs have 4 orcs and the undead have 7 skeletons, and you get the cards with them. And then it looks like you get all of the objective cards and the power cards for them, but it doesn't look like you get a board, which is weird because you need to. So you need to bring a board. So you will. It's a very odd choice.
Sets. Under the current model, you need in the multiplayer rules. I'm looking at the section now, Luke, and it does show every player needs a board. So in a 3-player game, you'd have 3 boards, and in a 4-player game, you need a 4 board. So you would need, under the current system, you would need 2 starter boxes to play 4 players because you need extra boards. Which again is not super expensive, but
no. But what I'm thinking is it's a very odd choice for that, where they could have put in the dice and a board in both of these, and you don't have to spend the $60 for the starter.
Yeah,
maybe they want to keep the board expansions a bit more generic so that they're not actually tied to particular figures. So maybe they'll do like a set with extra bits that everyone.
I think you're right, and also keeps the blisters small. So for a stock list, you can just keep a small wall of just blisters with all the different factions.
Yeah, because these boxes are way too small.
Right. I mean, you can't put a board in there.
The boards, even folded in half, take up most of the area of the big box. Yeah, so
the boards are big. So that's the way to go. And I think and they'll probably have a board expansion of different boards. But otherwise, I mean, the 4-player variant doesn't have a lot of rules in it. So it's pretty much the same thing, except you have more boards and a little more rules about how the action points work.
Gotcha.
What I think is really cool is how simple the deck building rules are. So, we can easily mention them here. You're building 2 decks. Your power deck, which is that mix of ploy and upgrade cards, with ploy being free to play, but they're like action enhancements, whereas upgrades are the cool war gear you add to your characters. And when the rule for power deck is really simple. It has to be at least 20 cards, and all must be unique. And no more than half of them can be ploys. So at least, the rest are upgrades, right? The objective deck, also simple. The objective deck is always exactly 12 unique objective cards, period. And the only other rule is all cards included in the decks you make must be unique to your must be usable by your warband. Sorry. So you basically can have generics in there that work for any warband, or you can have your specific warband ones, but you can't include anything in your decks that your warband can't use. Seems kind of obvious, but you probably need the rule written down somewhere. So that's it. That's pretty simple. So what's interesting about putting the complexity, what's really interesting about this is they put the complexity of list building into deck building, right? So there is no list building in this game. It's all in your deck. And it makes it super simple to do that, and it makes a super simple set of rules. And as long as GW and their rule makers can somehow make sure these decks can be, the rules in these cards are reasonably balanced with the factions they work with, everything should be fine. But that remains to be seen. But I think it's a really nice, clean, very clean mechanic. I really like it.
Yep.
So I think we talked about all the things. So that's pretty much the game.
Yeah.
So Craig, in the style of a knighted, what are these guys called again? These knights?
Stormcast Eternals.
Yes, in the style of a Stormcast Eternal, who has just bravely seen 1/3 of his force cut down by evil.
So one guy.
Yeah, right. Well, but 1/3 because
otherwise known as a weekday.
Yes, a weekday. Please describe the patent pending D6G rating system.
Okay. Oh, Angarad! She has fallen! Oh, I can't see a thing in this helmet. Let me just take this thing off. Oh, much better. Okay. Well, the shattered city looks quite shattered today, and there's Angarad. Of course, she'll probably come back tomorrow when we all wake up in this Groundhog's Day-like environment. But we need to worry about various and sundry different foes that may come at us out of the mirrors that surround us everywhere. So my brother, we are going to have to come up with some way to rate these dangers, and I think I have come across a plan. My plan is this. Why don't we give each one of them a score, relatively arbitrary, between 2 and 6, and we'll say the lower number is better, almost as if we were rolling a 6-sided die with numbers as opposed to little hammers and swords and eyeballs and whatnot. And so if I say, for instance, 3 hexes away, it's a 5+. You'll know, 5+. That's not very bad at all. That's not a very powerful thing at all. I don't care for it. I don't have to worry about it. But if I scream 2 hexes straight ahead, it's a 2+ with a reroll. Now, reroll is very mathematically improbable, but you understand what I'm saying. I'm just going to use it as a generic term for half. That means that's a very powerful foe right in front of you. So low, good, or powerful. High, bad, or not powerful. We don't really care for it. It's yuck, spit on it. No, we don't care. What do you think?
Excellent. Well done, sir.
Nice. Enemies coming out of mirrors. If that's actually a thing in this game, that's a cool bit of imagery.
It's a cool. The fluff is cool. It is. You're in this big city created by sorcerers where they created these mirrors to keep their consciousness in after they died, sort of like a magical computer, so that their wisdom and their knowledge could be plumbed by future generations, and then bad things happened, obviously, because wizards, mirrors. Enough said.
Right. So Craig, how would you? What are your final thoughts on this game? How would you rate it?
I like the gameplay. It's very simple and straightforward. There's no arguments. I think they've done a great job of making a very clean system. Of course, it's a very simple system, so it's sort of sacrificed the complexity of your action choices and your options for that clarification. It's not like a very elaborate system that's very well written and very clear. It's more like it's a very simple system and thus very clear. But I like that because it takes a lot of the ambiguity away. There's no question about what your options are, where you're going, and you can kind of tell because of your objective cards what you want to do and sort of what your play style is. My problem is, like many of these games with so many facets and so much, the depth is in so many different places. In this instance, in all these different cards, it's very hard. You have to go in and just have faith that it's balanced, right? There's no, like, you can't like look at the stats and go, well, these guys look equal to these guys, because an awful lot of the balance is coming from their cards. So, for instance, I've got these 3 Stormcast Eternals, and they've got more wounds than you, and their weapons generally do more wounds than your weapons do for the most part. But at the same time, like, you've got a lot of cards that are going to give you, their benefits. You've got the speed to sort of take advantage of the basic rules that will give you the overwhelming abilities. And so there's a lot happening sort of behind the scenes, as I say, within these cards that I think is very cool, but at the same time can be very frustrating if you don't get the right cards. So your luck, for instance, for me, my luck stinks, as we all know, even though, people tell me it's mathematically improbable, but it's still true. That not only are my dice rolling bad, like that one game where you crushed me, Russ, I had no objective cards I could do anything with. So without being able to do objective cards, you can't upgrade your guys, and my die rolling stunk. So even my basic stats weren't doing anything for me, and I lost I think it was 7 or 8 to nothing. I literally had nothing go. I could put nothing together, and now the game has some luck mitigation in that at the end of each turn you can get rid of any cards you don't want and draw back up. But within the actual action segments of the game, there's really no luck mitigation. So it's kind of like you're sort of at the mercy of your luck. Now, that being said, the game is very, very fast. So even at my most frustrated, when I got crushed 7-0, I immediately wanted to jump in and try it again, which is not common for me. Usually when I get crushed that badly, like in that last Rune Wars game that I lost so badly, I was like, not only do I not want to play again tonight, even if it was a half-hour game, I may not want to play ever again. And so there was a moment where I was like, I don't know, Russ, I don't know if I want to play this again, but I want to play it again right now just to see. And
well, it's short. That helps it
exactly.
out. Right?
It has that shortness. Yeah. And I don't like deck building games. So I don't like the fact that I have to go through and I have to start thinking like before I even play the game about like, oh, if I put in these 3 cards, then this is going to change my style in this way. And I don't naturally think to that intention, that level of intention. And so that's not something that I enjoy. So that may distance me from the particular game. But for a fast pickup kind of game, I really enjoyed it. So for my score, I would give this straight out of the box. I think I'm going to give it a 4+. Mm-hmm. If you're a miniatures player, I'm going to give it a +1. If you're a deck builder, I'm going to give it a +1. And if you're a miniature player who also likes deck building, I'm going to make those happen both together, so it would be a +2. So anywhere between a 2+ and a 4+.
All right,
that's the best I can do.
That's quite the spread, but a good one, I think. So I think this is really interesting here, and it's really going to depend on the expansions. I do think the core game, it's clearly designed for expansions, and they're going to have to get the expansions out quick. So I don't know Craig, have they shared their timetable at all with the expansions?
No, not that I know of.
So, I mean, Games Workshop's usually pretty fast at this sort of thing. So I hope they get it out there fast. But if they can get the expansions out quick, I think they might have something here. So I think it's really interesting. I love that they're going after a competitive game. I think Games Workshop should. I hope they can make this work, and they actually come up with something for Necromunda or 40K like this. That's not just rebooting the old Necromunda rules, because this feels like Games Workshop creating a skirmish game for 2017, which is good, because they need to. They keep just republishing their old skirmish games with slight changes, and it keeps the same problems they had in 1990 today. This game doesn't have those problems, which is wonderful, and it's very innovative. There's a lot of cool ideas here, and a lot of things that haven't really been done before, which I really think is neat. I think it's really interesting that they put the customizations into the decks. I think this is really, really smart, and will serve them very well. And it allows them to fix faction issues by releasing new cards or releasing replacement variant cards with very little effort. They can fix, balance issues. I think the rules are super solid. They're super easy to read. Great index. It plays very fast, and I love the tactical parts of this. Now, Craig, I might disagree with you, but I think there is luck mitigation, at least in some of the factions, because the cards have luck mitigation.
That's true. That's actually very true.
The cards have the ability to get rerolls or retry an attack or add bonus damage to attacks. So if you have as much control building your decks as I think you're going to, you could build a luck mitigating deck, I suppose, is kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Or you could build a deck with less luck mitigation, but heavier hits when you get lucky, So you probably can do different things like that. So that'll be really interesting to me to see. So, for example, if it's a generic card, and I think it is, to be able to reroll a missed attack, you could jack your deck with those. Although you can't, because every card has to be unique, so you can't do that. But there may be different flavors of those kinds of luck mitigating cards. I hope there are. But I like it a lot. There's a lot to like about this game. I just don't love... I'm not loving the current art direction for Age of Sigmar. and so I'm not in love with some of these models yet. It's not that they're not amazing sculpts. I kind of think I'm where you, Luke. When they shifted, I didn't shift with them.
My issue's never been the art direction. I think the art direction for most GW stuff is fantastic. My issue is largely around the universe feeling like the interpretation of a bad fan fiction novel. So, yeah,
I don't like the new. I don't like, and this is just me. I mean, because they're beautiful sculpts. There's no doubt about that. I don't like the pictures of the orcs aren't striking my fancy. The pictures of the undead aren't, which is weird for me because I usually love them. And so I don't know. I haven't seen any models I love in this set, which is weird for me because usually Games Workshop models I'm in love with. So I don't know what my problem is there. Maybe it's just me. But I love the idea of this game. So if the right faction came out for me, I think I'd pick it up. So I'm going to be with you, Craig. I think I'm going to give this game a 4+. But I will make it a +2 for any Games Workshop universe fan.
Okay.
Right? That's what I'm going to do. So that makes it... I'm not sure it's going to go beyond the game. I'm not sure it's going to bring in non-Games Workshop folks. I don't know if it's going to pull that off.
Okay.
I hope it does for them because I think it's a really, really nice effort. They put a lot of work into it. It's a nice package, so I hope it does. But that's my thing. So 4+, 2+ if you are a Games Workshop fan. Luke, what do you think? Having heard us prattle on for this for the better part of 45 minutes or so, what is your desire to try this out?
Yeah, well, I think you probably summarized it quite well with the last couple of things you said. I mean, on the surface, it seems like a really attractive entry-level proposition to miniature gaming. So people who aren't necessarily invested in, the Games Workshop ecosystem or Warhammer in general, I think there's an easy onboarding for them with this game, with the slightly lower price point and the number of figures involved and the easy snap together and the painting not being a necessary part of the game if you don't want to go that direction. That all sounds really good. Equally pitched at someone like me who has sort of, been down the road of the larger Games Workshop hobby before, but maybe wants something a little bit lighter to supplement other games these days, when you sort of are a little more time strapped and you have your interests sort of spread across a whole bunch of different areas. That does sound quite good. The thing that concerns me more than anything is that it sounds like a fun game. The mechanics sound good. It sounds like they put a bit of thought into how it works. The pitch as a competitive game is the thing that is going to be the make or break for me when it comes to sort of investing in something like this. So, expansions are going to be a big part of that, of course, because where they build it is going to make a big difference. But the thing that concerns me more than anything is the variation when you're playing games that are sort of as short and sharp and fast as this one is. So, you can play lots of games, sure, but you don't ever want lots of games to be a sort of cop-out solution to increase your sample size for a game that has like big swings, So, and when you're talking about tournaments and sort of structured play, if it's a situation where they're saying, look, in a given round of a tournament, you might play against the same person 3 times, like you would in, say, like a Magic the Gathering sort of tournament, so that you can decrease the variation with the wild swings that the game creates a little bit and make it a bit fairer. But my answer to that is that if you're really going to make it competitive, then there should be more player agency to begin with. It shouldn't be based on those swings. It should be something that you have a much greater degree of control over the competitive aspect of the game, and therefore it is sort of coming down to player skill and not luck. So, it's the holy grail, really, isn't it, when it comes to miniature games, the sort of balance between fun and luck versus player skill. It's very, very hard to get right. I think there's very few games that have. So I don't know if I'm expecting particularly too much of Games Workshop, who traditionally haven't sort of, tried to do that a lot. It certainly sounds fun though. Like I'm definitely on board with what you've described as the game. The competitive aspect of it, I think, is a big question mark. So it will depend on player feedback. It will depend on community sort of adoption of the system and whether there starts to, be events that pop up around the place and sort of some structured, organized play and all that kind of thing. I'm certainly keen to give it a go, if nothing else. I think I could definitely sit down and have a solid crack at it and make my mind up for myself. The models look great, as always. Games Workshop figures are still, top of the heap when it comes to a lot of the stuff out there in the industry. So, and I have no doubt that they'll have some spectacular entries sort of moving forward. I do echo your thoughts about the ones in the box not having a huge amount of character though, Ross. I think, compared to some of the other boxed game style sets that they've done recently, where the individual named characters have had a bit more personality. This one kind of maybe doesn't stand out as much. But I don't know. We'll see. It reminds me a bit more of like a Blood Bowl team in terms of the character level, because you don't tend to have the star players in the starting box. You tend to have like regular team members, and that's kind of what this comes across as. So yeah. I'd maybe go a 4+ as well. I think 4+ desire to play is pretty close to the mark, with a potential reroll there pending what happens next. So looking forward to the community adoption and add-ons that they create. And I mean, it's the perfect time of year for that, really, isn't it? Because we're heading up to Christmas. If they don't have a whole bunch of releases planned for the next few months, then they're probably asleep at the wheel. So yeah,
I think they'll probably dump a bunch. Well, Luke, thank you so much.
Wait, because it took some digging, but posted today on the Warhammer community website is the announcement that the orcs and the undead will be up for pre-order next weekend, which means that when you listen to this episode, they will be making it to retailers probably the weekend after that, so the first week of November.
Well, that's exciting. So in a month, we'll have, or even less than a month.
So and it just came, 14. and it just hit retail yesterday. So yeah, so that's actually that's in like 2 weeks time. Yeah, you've got four factions.
That's great. That means in December you might get 2 more. They might get to 6 by Christmas. That'd be awesome.
Yeah,
four factions, Russ. That's your magic number. There you go.
4 is the magic number. I'd say. They can pull it off that fast.
As you guys were talking, I was looking, and I'm seeing a lot of people claiming that GW has said there will be 8. I haven't seen them say that. I do know that they're planning at least 6 because the rule book seems to hint of the dwarves and the Skaven next.
Yeah.
But I haven't. I like everybody's saying,
"Oh, you could get me." I love Skaven.
Everybody's saying like, "Oh, you can see all 8 in the rule book," and I haven't. And I guess, I mean, admittedly, I don't know Age of Sigmar enough to know another faction if I saw one. So nobody that looks elvish or otherwise like jumps out at me. But I see
they're the same factions as Warhammer, Craig. They've just given them all new names, like their paint range.
Yeah, right. So. There's on page 8 and 9 of the rule book, you've got the 2 that came in the box, and then you've got the orcs and the dwarves and the sepulchral guard, the undead, and Spite Claw's swarm, the Skaven. So I don't know where the 7 and 8th one might be hiding, but there's 6 right there.
Cool. So there you have it. So Luke, thank you so much for joining us here in this episode. Really appreciate it. It's
ridiculously busy
anytime,
schedule.
Guys.
Great to talk about video games with you, my friend. So if folks want to hear more about you or what you're up to, whatever things are going on there, where should they go on the internet to find you, sir?
Yeah, sure. Well, you can find pretty much everything we do over at channelendgame.com. We also exist on YouTube, so you'll find our video content there at youtube.com/channelendgame. But the podcast specifically, which is called Party Loaded, it is a weekly show. It goes for about 60 to 90 minutes. We've got a mixed panel of 2 guys and 2 gals chatting video games every single week. We talk about all the latest and greatest. You can find us on all places that you can find podcasts, iTunes, Google Play. That's the Android one, isn't it? I don't actually have an Android phone, so I'm not sure. And yeah, on partyloaded.com as well. And check it out. We'd love for you to come and have a listen.
Well, awesome, Luke. Thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to having you on the show in not too distant future, and have a great holiday season.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys. Set your calendar. Oh, I will. Don't worry.
Yeah.
It's a little shame that I couldn't talk about all the fun I'm going to be having until I get back. But we'll do this again next year and hopefully catch up again then.
It'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
Right. Take care, Luke.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Bye. This Did You Ever Notice is brought to you by everyone over at Patreon who checked out our stuff, may or may not have watched our video, and decided it was worth helping out after all. Anyway, despite the video. Thanks, folks, and today I would like to thank Dennis Eddy, Ted Elric, Michael Alvbach, Keith Ferguson, and Daniel Ferreira. I'm going to go with that. Did you ever notice how fragile the functions of the human brain can be? I'm talking about how you can be thrown off by the simplest things. and how some not so simple things might throw you off in ways you're not even aware of. I am coming off yet another medical crisis, so 2017 cannot end soon enough for me. This time around, it was my grandmother, and again, everything looks like it's going to be okay. So I don't know how many more of these best case scenarios we're going to be able to pull out of the hat before something really bad happens and happened. But I am, at the moment, everything seems to be okay after a week of traveling down to Boston General Hospital, which smells, at least the neurology floors, for some reason, and this is bizarre, and I thought of you guys when I realized it, smells like Gen Con. I don't know why. Maybe it's just all those smart people or something. I don't know, but it was a comforting little weird side thing for me. On top of that, coming right off of that, as soon as I got my grandmother to my parents' house, where the aged and infirm are now going to take care of the aged and infirm for a while, we had the remnants of a tropical storm. Nothing compared to anything that struck the rest of the planet lately, but the winds were so bad I did spend about an hour and a half just outside in my yard staring up at the trees, wondering if my house was going to make it through the night. Luckily, school was canceled the next day because of there were downed wires everywhere. The town where I teach, 90% of it was out of power. The town I live in, about 70% of it was out of power, so school was canceled on that day. So I was able to sleep in a little bit, except that now I am recording this to you in a house where there is no power, except that I do have a little system that I inherited when we bought the house that does parts of the house, and so I had to move everything around. And didn't realize that was happening either, because my brain has just been on overload so much that I didn't realize today is Halloween. I didn't realize that Halloween was the end of the month. I'm starting to fear for my own mental capacity, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, my next big task is going to be how I possibly can get this that I'm recording now to Russ, because I don't have any internet either. So I'm going to have to bring it someplace that has Wi-Fi, I think. I'm going to have to bring my laptop. Oh, geez, I guess I'm going to have to go out to eat. Oh, well. A Panera has Wi-Fi. I'll probably end up going to Panera. I just realized that now. You guys and me, we're all experiencing this epiphany together right now. Anyway. None of this is actually what I intended to talk about. Recently, did you ever notice how hard it is to deal with some people because they always seem to have things going on? That's what I was going to talk about. And I went through as best I can here in the house with no power. I went through all of the past Did You Ever Notices that I could find. I want to say that I talked about this before at some point, and I can't find any titles, which is all I have access to right now, that remind me of this. And it's a piece of advice. I can't even remember where I got it. It might have been some celebrity in an interview. It might have been a former teacher. It could have been anything, especially the way my brain is all stir-fried right now. But the piece of advice is always remember that everyone you meet is fighting a battle of their own. And I feel like I've said that before on the show at some point, but it bears saying again, even if I have. The key is you don't know what's going on in anybody else's life, and so when you come up against them and they're pushing back at you, or they're inaccessible emotionally for some reason, rather than just be frustrated that you can't do what you want to do, or that you can't get to them for some reason, or get out of them what you need to take into account the fact that they're fighting their own battles. That's part of it, and I think that's something that most people are aware of, or on some level. And I think that the key is to be kind, and that's That's what I'm trying to do now. It's hard with a sarcastic sense of humor as I have. But I think the key to this whole process of dealing with other people is to try to be kind and empathetic. Try to understand where they're coming from and know that you don't know. You can't know. And even if on those rare occasions they're going to explain to you what's going on, you're really not going to understand, because the other half of this, which I think is infinitely more important, infinitely more difficult to access, and in infinitely greater need right now across the globe than at any other time that I've been alive, is understanding that no matter how you feel about that other person's struggles, they're real to them. And I'm starting to get physically ill hearing so many people just dismiss other people's problems. And, well, you don't really understand. You don't know. You're not living in a desert somewhere, which is very true. But the problem is, if I'm incapable, for instance, of paying one of the bills that I have to pay, that is a source of stress in my life. And the fact that other people in the world are, and this is not my situation, I'm sort of channeling other things that I've seen. I'm fine, really, honestly, I'm okay. But the fact that other people in the world are worse off than you are doesn't mean that you're not going through the stress of what you're going through. And that's twofold. One, don't be one of these people who are trying to dismiss other people's difficulties just because other people are having it worse. And two, don't let those people convince you that you shouldn't be feeling the stress that you're feeling, or that the emotions that you're feeling are invalid somehow because other people in the universe are feeling are experiencing things worse than you are. Now, should you always be aware of that? Yes. See point 1 of today's Did You Ever Notice? Always try to be kind. Always try to understand where the other person is coming from, and always keep in mind that you can't understand it, and leave some reserve of goodwill and kindness in there as a cushion, knowing that you're never really going to be able to know exactly what that person is going through, right? But at the same time, you're dealing with your own stuff, whether it's bills you can't pay, whether it's a girl that won't talk to you or a boy that won't talk to you, whether it's any of the millions of countless things, whether it's you losing too many games, whether it's you can't find anybody to play a game with. Those emotions that you're feeling, they're valid. Okay, now, I mean, I'm obviously on the other side of this particular token is the excessive drama that you might want to, or some people might bring into their lives that just doesn't seem commensurate. But even then, you have to be the one. See, it's so much that we're each living in our own heads that there's really no clean cut A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to start singing a Jackson song any second now. Is it? I don't know. Anyway, there's no, it's not engineering. There's no clean cut. Yes, you need to be kind this % of the time, blah, 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 blah. But what you have to do is keep in mind what everybody else might be going through and try to be kind to them. And this world will be a better place if we're all trying to be kind. And other people not being kind is not a license for you not to be kind. Okay, maybe to them, but in general in your life, if you see someone on the news who's not being kind, that is not a license for you to start being a jerk too. So that's an added little bonus that I thought I'd throw in there, because now I'm rambling, because again, see, stir-fry brain, and the fact that I'm sitting in a dark basement wondering how anybody's ever going to hear that. So, Panera, that's right. See? Yes, stir-fry. They don't have stir-fried Panera. That's okay. I'm not really in a stir-fry mood. That's about all I've got to say about that. I hope I can figure out how to put music on this. Thanks for listening, and good night.
Achievement unlocked! You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by either emailing us at info@thed6generation.com or by posting in our official D6G episode thread at the top of the DACA discussions forum on DACA.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening, and happy gaming.
The theme from Total Fangirl comes from the soundtrack of The Last Night on Earth, the zombie game, courtesy of Flying Frog Productions, and is a composition of Mary Beth Magalanes.
Good morning, or how do you do that in the morning? Because good day seems wrong for the morning. How does that work?
That's a really good question. We don't actually say good day a whole lot that, more than probably the outside world perceives it. So.
Is it overused?
That's fine, Luke, but how many times do you say throw another shrimp on the Barbie, though?
That is precisely zero.
Well,
that is precisely zero.
I brought that up because your little quote on Skype says good day. So
yeah, actually, it probably does.
I felt like I should say good day, and then I realized it was morning for you, and that felt wrong. So
look, my whole strategy when I'm sort of speaking to people from the US is I take the same approach that I would if I was working a bar over there. You basically got to double down on the Australianisms to basically
that's true, yeah.
Right.
do the whole thing.
Just power through it, right? Just let us lead us down the pretend. Right. It's very much like when people talk to Americans, we all pretend we're from the West and we're cowboys.